OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along this Monday morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's myself and Eoin Sheahan with you this morning all the way through until 10 o'clock. Eoin, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. You're nearly back in studio. We had Johnny Ward in for a short while for Friday Night Racing, so we're getting there. You can be freed from the bunker, the room that you've been stuck in for the last 6 months.
Well, it actually feels like I haven't been in the bunker very often whatsoever. It's good to be back here in my true home. It's an odd sensation because I was in on Saturday also with a little bit of studio-to-studio action. Will O'Callaghan was in chatting, shooting the breeze at the top of the show on Saturday. It's a strange sensation talking from the opposite side of the room. It feels like you're shouting across at somebody, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, but maybe this is the future. Maybe we don't actually need to ever meet each other or see each other again. I mean, I'm fine with this.
Oh, I'm totally fine with this. You know, after my holidays there, it was great to get back into the trackies this morning. You're
a young person, known as we have established over the many years of doing this show. You're still, even after all the many years that you've been doing this show, you're still a young person. So how was Dame Lane on Friday or Saturday night?
I'd like to distance myself from Dame Lane immediately.
Too late.
Thankfully, I've already got the line in that I was working Saturday, so I did have.
So Saturday night, was it Saturday night you were there? What was the crack?
Well, when you walked through Dame Lane on Saturday evening to get out of town, so to speak, it was like Robbie Brady had scored his goal all over again.
Right.
That was probably the only time I've ever kind of spent a prolonged period of time there, and the scenes, as people will have seen on social media, were very, very similar. There was, I think, 3 different boom boxes. There was a live band that had developed, and there was a lot of people who were in quite jubilant form. A lot of people who, I guess, probably don't have the same level of fear as some other people of a second wave. And perhaps being told that there's going to be a second wave encourages people that, you know, we better get one good night in before the second wave does hit.
And was it crack? Was it good crack? Did you have the crack, Eoin? Was it worth it?
Was it worth it for me? Again, would like to distance myself from the jubilation being enjoyed at Dame Lane. It looked like a lot of people were having a lot of crack. I will give it that. It wasn't just there though. Like there was, no matter what street you walked down in south side of the Liffey in Dublin on Saturday evening, it looked like a lot of people were having fun. Nobody was inside watching Arsenal against Watford, which I think, or Arsenal against Wolves, I should say, which was highly insulting, I think, to the Premier League as a product.
Well, there was a lot of Premier League football, it turns out, and you're like, oh, there's no more games. Like, actually, there's 2 more games. There's still 2 more games. There's always 2 more games to go tonight. No matter what time of the night is, you get to midnight, you're like, I can go to bed. No, there's 2 more games. Don't tune out. One last thing about this. Who did we have on who was saying they were talking about the number of clusters in China, and 305 of the 306 clusters had been indoor. Only 1 cluster of the studied clusters in China had ended up being outdoor, and so outdoor sports. It was Anna Falvey was on Keith Wood's State of the Union last week, so maybe everybody outdoors actually isn't the disaster that social media would have you believe. The virologists and immunologists who are diagnosing exactly what's wrong, and these people are the spawn of Satan. How dare they be young and having fun? Sure, look, we'll see.
Yeah, potentially. Like, I definitely think that there is a difference in the videos that would have gone viral at the weekend to the videos that went viral at the start of coronavirus, when you had people singing Sweet Caroline inside in a pub.
Indoors, yeah.
I think those 2 things are quite different.
And it doesn't seem like there was a cluster of people in that pub either, though, right? Like,
I'm not quite sure, to be quite honest. I haven't gone through and actually haven't got my tracing app and managed to call out the people that actually were in that pub that night. And I'm sure it was a bit of a situation where you actually had the lyrics that night. There was a specific element of Sweet Caroline which really riled people up from social media that night because of, you know, the hands touching hands part of that.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, so hands touching hands, everybody getting the virus off it. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, 0879 180 180, you can WhatsApp us your fever at the rage that you feel at the people having a good time on Friday and Saturday as people emerge from lockdown. And what were the actual pubs like? What was the experience of being in a pub like? Because I still haven't been in one.
Pretty good, yeah, pretty good. I think every pub is trying to get used to trying to do things their own way, trying to make their way and stuff like that. Actually getting enough people into the pub that makes it worthwhile to actually go there. And again, seems pretty decent. It doesn't seem like too far removed from what we used to know and love. It's just more planning is all. It's just actually getting in touch with your friends rather than a sort of, where are you? Yeah, on my way over now. It's actually, you've got to get your stuff organised about a day in advance, and obviously get in touch with publicans or whatever to try and sort yourself out a table or whatever it may be. But yeah, it's certainly walking through Dublin on that lovely Saturday evening that we had. You really did think we had all been partying like it was February 2019 again.
Yeah. So it was like
2020,
like that scene in Shawshank where you're drinking on the roof. For a moment you were free. You could feel the sun on your backs.
And then and then everybody ruined it for us. Or I don't know what the next thing is that happens, but I'm sure we all know what it is going to be. That there is going to be some sort of upshoot, unfortunately, in cases, and we might have to go back indoors for a little while longer. But that's the situation, and that's what happened on. I'm sure tons of people, 1.5 million people apparently saw that video, one of the videos anyway, from Dame Lane on Saturday night.
His New Soccer reporter Barry White, I think, is the one that has racked up the 1.5 million views. It's 7:36 this morning here on OTB AM. As I said earlier, if you want to get in touch with us, use the hashtag OTB AM on Twitter, or you can WhatsApp us 087 918 180 is the number. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. Sports page is coming your way around about 8:15. BMW Run and Ride. Our guest is Karen Kavanagh, who's doing the duathlon along with us. Although Eoin's not doing it, I say us. Eoin somehow managed to squirm his way out of this one and not do it. I've no idea why. You obviously hate charity. GAA with Anthony Moyles coming your way at 9 o'clock this morning, and football with Gary Breen. Is Mikel Arteta a genius? Has he turned things around that quickly at Arsenal? We'll see. But obviously, we'll talk about Man United, we'll talk about Liverpool a little bit later on as well. Damien Delaney and Brian Kerr in a few moments talking about those two games and those two teams at the weekend. But we're starting with GAA. Tommy Conlon and Conor McKeown were on the Sunday paper review with Joe talking about the GAA. Have a look.
It was very amusing metaphor by Eamon to explain the latest contretemps in the GAA via the medium of rubber johnnies, and using the that sort of parallel, basically our time-honoured hypocrisy towards the law in Ireland and regulations and rules, and which we all know was very much part of the culture in 20th century Ireland, in sort of post-independence Ireland, and where there was always this ambivalent sort of dual attitude towards rules and regulations. And Eamon, we were supposed to have moved on from that post joining the EEC and post Celtic Tiger and all like that. We got much better at observing and respecting the law of the land and the rules and regulations. But there are times when we revert to type, and Eamon has dredged up this kind of comical sort of reference to the past and our famous Irish solution to an Irish problem when it came to contraception, and very nicely dovetails that into the issue about county versus club and Croke Park, which is supposed to be nowadays sort of above board in terms of observing the sort of rules and regulations, and that Croke Park resorted to the old traditional Irish attitude of, if rules are being broken, look the other way. And there seems to be an element of that, a strong element of that. And finally, there were more, it seems, almost more or less shamed into owning up to their responsibilities, and finally being flushed out to kind of lay down the law, at least in theory, at least they're promising to, or threatening to, as per last Friday. But Conor might be able to shed further light on whether they actually will, or is there any chance at all that that they might actually haul in a couple of county team managers who have been blatantly flouting the regulations and actually do something about it.
Yes, Eamon concludes, Conor, the ordinary GAA members have recovered their honour by refusing to be treated like fools this week. The GAA's top brass ended up being the ones who got called out. The Irish solution to an Irish problem turned out to be just as foolish as Haughey's was back in the 80s. It was a bad week for Croke Park, but it was a very good week for the GAA. I mean, in some respects, Tommy makes the point that we had thought we had grown out of rule breaking, but really in the world of the GAA, and not least when it comes to payments to managers, there are many areas where we never have. It seems this week they were held to account, almost, was the point. It was quite a striking week in that maybe there was an assumption a week ago that, well, look, county teams will train on the sly. You know, there was meant to be a ban before Christmas a couple of years ago. That was flouted. These things just get flouted. I wonder, did the GAA just not suspect this would blow up into the issue it became this week? And why did it, is the interesting question.
Yeah, there's a kind of a, I don't know, there's a bit of a mood swing away from, I mean, there's a universal acceptance that the messy nature of the calendar in the GAA and the fact that, like, one thing the GAA doesn't do very well is prioritise. So, you know, you have situations where players are training with their club in the week that they play a Sigerson game or a Fitzgibbon game, and you have a situation where players are playing international rules, selected for a squad, and then they have to make the decision. And the same thing happens with the club situation. And we're in, I think, a very unique sort of situation this year because of the way the thing is structured. Because if you're an inter-county manager here, and I know that not very many of them are saying a whole pile at the moment, but if you're an inter-county manager, you know, you bring your squad back training in November, you have them basically until April, and then you give them back to the clubs, and then you get them back for the championship until it's over. So they've a huge level of control over players' habits and what they do, and how they look after themselves and what they do with their time. And like, what's happening in this situation is the part that the GAA season already played in an inter-county context is null and void. It basically may not have existed, may as well not have existed for most counties, because, you know, the break in between means that managers, I would imagine, some of them are having panic attacks over the lack of preparation that they feel they will have ahead of what is already a much more cutthroat championship than usual. So that's essentially the nugget of where this whole contretemps has started. Inter-county managers who are probably the people in the situation, well, they're probably the people in the roles that, if not the most high pressurised in GAA, are certainly the most highly scrutinised in the GAA. And like, we talk about inches deciding these games, you know, the big games in championship, and like, how many inches are you going to get by having an extra 3 or 4 weeks collective training? So like, that's why these teams are training. Like, I think sometimes we're very quick to assign blame in these standoffs, or anytime there's any controversy in the GAA, and say this side is right and this side is wrong. And I think, mostly speaking, you know, we know which side is right and which side is wrong in this situation. But it's important to understand why people are being put in this situation, and it's important to see that it's actually the players that are being put in a very, very awkward situation by having to serve two masters in some cases. But I think the interesting dynamic now will be on the county boards, because on Friday the GAA, according to reports, made it very, very clear to the county boards that it is up to them to enforce this. And if they're found to be in contravention of this rule, they're going to bring in that catch-all phrase, behaviour which is deemed to have discredited the association, which carries an 8-week suspension, which would effectively take a county out of the championship. Now, would they go to that extent to take a team out? I doubt it. But it's no longer on them, I suppose. That's the big point. The stand they took on Friday now puts this on county boards to police their own situation, many of whom, by the way, who are already coming under an awful lot of pressure from clubs within their counties to get their inter-county players back. So, you know, it's a delicate ecosystem, the GAA, at the best of times, and at this moment it's a bit fractious.
Tommy, there's no doubt the county setup has been attacked over the last number of years. It's almost, you know, spoken about as the ruination of the true beauty of the games, and the club player and the club scene is this wonderful setting where nothing bad ever happens, and the county game is almost marginalised in terms of how it's regarded. And like, for me, I mean, I want a vibrant county scene. and I watch county hurling and football far more than I will ever watch club hurling and football. I understand the importance of the club, but we could be going too far here. Like, I would put it to you on this week, there's a twofold issue, and Colm O'Rourke touches on this in his piece, solutions becoming part of the problem in new GAA reality. So, okay, point one we can all agree on. It is ludicrous and embarrassing for the GAA to set rules and then say there's no sanctions and we're not really going to enforce them. And they got called out in this week. That's just madness, and whoever in there thinks that was the way to approach this, Colm makes the point that Tom Ryan's reputation has been damaged in this whole process, and you'd have to agree with that. And the GPA kind of saying, well, look, we agree with the GAA, but if training is happening, even though it's not meant to, we want our players insured. That whole thing's a mess, right? Agreed. And they've made a mess of it. But the next layer is, are we going too far here in that we're saying there can be no county training whatsoever until September 14th? Does it really need to be that way? Like Colm O'Rourke makes the point, if you're in Wexford, for instance, their hurling final finishes up on August 22nd. So if you don't, and they say we want the football club championship to happen after that. So if you don't play football in Wexford and you're finished your championship on the 22nd, are we really saying that as a hurler you shouldn't train with the Wexford hurlers until September 14th? You should just sit at home or train on your own for 3 weeks. So it struck me, and Colm O'Rourke makes the point, we should have had a rule where, for instance, the county gets one night a week with these players, even in the midst of this 11-week stretch, for instance. Whatever the solution, we could find one. But it struck me as, yes, the GAA set out rules which they were never going to impose, but the rule they set out in the first place seemed overly punitive of the county manager.
Yeah, so that was the start of a long enough conversation on the pay-per-view yesterday with Conor McKeown and Tommy Conlon speaking with Joe. What's your take on all this, Eoin? I haven't spoken to you about it since you came back from your month-long holiday. How are you getting on? What's the story?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, there's obviously been an unbelievable torrent of anger and fury directed at the GAA over the past 10, 14 days or however long it's been. And I guess the U-turn was a great success for everybody involved last week when they said that they would punish county teams. But it is interesting when you think about Tom Ryan's initial comments, how some of it is actually still kind of true. And you kind of have to have a little bit of sympathy for him, given what he said. Like that particular line about him saying that we would expect counties to be called out and there would be no punishments. That was his initial line. Now, what he has changed from that is that there will be a punishment. But what is still true is that counties probably still need to be called out. And that is the issue that the GAA will always have to battle with. I can't really see there being a time at any case over the next few years where that will change. The way a county gets caught is if you have some sort of Randall from Recess type character who will snitch on the students to the principal, who will call them out, as Tom Ryan says, and point the finger. You might have to have a guy up a tree in with the binoculars, actually looking at what's going on the county pitch. Somebody will need to commit treachery or something terrible in order for somebody to get caught. So I'm confused as to how punishments are going to be meted out if the wrong thing is being done and how that wrong thing is going to be identified, because there are too many people with vested interests who may not point the finger, because I guess at the end, the county board are going to be the ones who suffer as well. Yeah,
fundamentally, it does appear at the moment as if the club teams can't live with the county teams, and that's the issue. You go back to Pat Gilroy's idea where clubs would release players to the county as opposed to the other way around, that it's the club who has the first call on them, and that for a period of time a year they are released to the counties and then they're the county players. But there was definitely a halfway house where you could have had one night a week county training. The difficulty is, and the lads go on to have that conversation yesterday, Tommy Conlon pointing out that the ego of the manager will then intervene, where he's like, well, if I'm only going to have them one night a week, then they can't train with the club for fear that they might be getting lesser training, for example, or they might get injured. And so all of a sudden, the one night a week that they're allowed to play with the county is actually the only training that they're doing. They're actually doing 2 or 3 nights on their own. So, I do feel like we haven't reached some level of accommodation just yet. And there's fairly explosive stuff from Micheál Brodie in an interview they did with Midwest yesterday, which we'll get to in the newspapers. But the notion that a season that is a club season and an inter-county season. That's what we're going to have for the next few months. It's not very radical, but it's a bit radical. It's not as radical as an open draw would have been, for example, for the actual championship itself. We're going to get to see what that looks like. And you would hope that some of the evidence from that is taken forward next year, and that there's a club season and there's an inter-county season, and it's very clearly demarked. And so maybe, just maybe, we can take something from all this.
Possibly. Like, it would have been an interesting experiment had we actually managed to proceed with one night with your county and the rest of your week dedicated to the club, because that would be something that would be more sustainable than this, wouldn't it? Like, the
sustainability is a big issue, actually, because when you think about how much money goes into fundraising for counties so that they can pay for the senior inter-county team, and this year that's going to be, for many teams, one championship match. And it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense to have the massive outpouring of expenditure. And obviously there'll be less money on travel because teams won't have done the 600 training sessions where they're all around the country, and there won't be any of those away weekends training in expensive training place. But at the same time, how sustainable is what everybody was doing? Not very, it turns out, to the point of breaking.
Like, one of the interesting facets, and it's kind of on a smaller level that we're going to encounter over the next couple of months, that is, if this club championship gets the exposure that I hope it does, that counties have good streaming services in place, that there's the TV games are all really good, and that we get good access to this as a public, that we will start to talk about Club GAA in a similar-ish manner to how we talk about Premier League games before a big international tournament. So that discourse would be such and such a player is playing their way into the England team, or that would certainly be the discourse in the UK before World Cup or before European Championships. Unfortunately, we haven't been in enough of them ourselves for that to be a regular thing here. But that will possibly be the discourse we'll be having at certain points around the club championship. Who is playing their way into the inter-county team? And that is something that the club should be embracing, that this idea that the inter-county team is the big bad enemy perhaps doesn't always need to be the way, that there is a symbiotic nature to this, that you are contributing for the county's cause by putting together a great club team, by putting your best foot forward as a club team, by getting your players ready for the year that is ahead. And if it was a situation where perhaps the entire GAA off-season in future years was January and February, and then you kicked off the year with your club action in March, and that was what covered everything for the first few months before players limbered up for their inter-county championship in the late summer or early autumn. That could be something that would be potentially more sustainable. But I know we're at great risk here of just getting into a championship structure.
We accidentally, there you go, we were straight there. Welcome back, Eoin. It's like you've never been away. 7:53 this morning. If you want to propose some championship structures, not us. Don't email us if you've got proposed championship structures. We don't want to hear it, okay? It's 7:53 this morning. We will talk a bit more about the club versus county stuff a little bit later on with Anthony Moyles. But a reminder that the best place to get the papers, the Sunday Papers podcast, you can subscribe on the shiny new OTB Sports app. Just search for OTB Sports in the Google Play Store or the App Store. Now, what are we at? As I said, 7:54 this morning here. Damien Delaney was on Premier League commentary duty for OTB Sports yesterday afternoon as we brought you live coverage of Liverpool's 2-0 defeat of Aston Villa. Here he is talking about what Liverpool are going to learn at the end of the season, and he also has a great story in the middle of this about Jurgen Klopp getting thick with him for celebrating a little bit too much. That's the type of thing that Jose Mourinho comes out with, but it turns out Jurgen Klopp doesn't like you rubbing it in his face either. Have a listen.
He gave him a chance to reward them for their patience all season. Guys that wouldn't necessarily have played every week, they're not guaranteed starters. They're still putting in the same hours that everyone else is, although they're not playing on a Saturday, but they train on a Sunday the day after. And I know that a lot of teams will, the 11 that don't play on a Saturday, they'll train on a Sunday morning while the others are doing a recovery, and they'll do the same numbers in a session in terms of distance covered that the lads did on a Saturday. So they are working equally as hard as everyone. And you've got to reward these guys. You've got to give them some sort of a carrot, some sort of a kind of a pat on the head to say, listen. So there's an element of that, and there's also an element of like, right, prove to me that I was wrong to not play you guys from the start of the season. But today he just kind of went, well, I think I was right to keep sticking with Henderson and Wijnaldum. But moving forward, those three can't last forever. Henderson is, I think, I won't say on the wane a little bit, but I think he'll have to limit his numbers a little bit more than what he has done this year, because I know he has dragged them quite a few times. But where do they go from here? And I know the Klopp will certainly be thinking about that.
Their first 11 we know is arguably the best 11 in Europe when they're playing at their peak. But can they keep going into what will be a third, fourth season of competing at the very highest level without depth and without the players who come in and are asked to come in consistently and putting pressure on the 11, which is the other thing, because
absolutely.
it feels as though that those players on the outside are the backup. You never look at any of them and think, geez, he's really putting Wijnaldum under pressure for a starting 11.
I agree with you, and you're asking these questions, and I think Jurgen Klopp will be asking these questions. These 4 transfer windows ahead of where he wants to be. He'll have a dossier this thick on his desk of where he wants Liverpool to be in 2 years, the brand of football they want to play, the type of player they want to play, the youth they want to bring through, and exactly the path that they're on. He's not a manager that's won the league and he's going to go and have a good time for a month and then come back in the summer and go, right, where are we going from here, lads? I guarantee you he'll have teams of analysts behind the scenes scouring Europe, looking for players to come in, players that can fit the direction he may want to go in.
What if they don't, though? Because he has said that with the financial crisis, no, not in terms of the scouts scouring Europe, but what if nobody comes in? Do you think Liverpool can contest for Premier League and Champions League again next season if they don't have reinforcements?
If Liverpool don't get anyone else in, I can't imagine anyone else. So if this pandemic has affected football and everything gets scaled back, then everything gets scaled back. Man City are going to struggle, and it's going to be the status quo. Manchester United might be a little bit stronger because they've blooded so many youth players that are kind of on an upward curve, whereas Liverpool are potentially, if they don't reinvest or reinvigorate that squad. Man City have already gone over the crest, and on the way down they need to come again. So he does need to invest. He will invest. They have money. Their net spend is something like 100 million, so there will be cash available to him. But he's not just going to spend it willy-nilly. He's not just going to get in players for the sake of it. He will have a clear plan, a clear path wherever he wants to go.
Today was their 24th straight victory at Anfield in the Premier League. They've won every game at Anfield this season. I think they're now in 57 games unbeaten at Anfield. You were part of the last team to win there with Crystal Palace over 3 years ago. In fact, you were part of a couple of Crystal Palace teams that won at Anfield, the games that we covered at the time on Off the Ball. And they're games that always stand out of the atmosphere around the Liverpool supporters towards the Liverpool players and the lack of trust they had, that even when they went in front like they did, I think Philip Coutinho scored that day, that they never fully trusted the team would hold on. There were so many defensive mistakes. Can you talk a bit about how they've turned it into such a fortress? All right, the fans aren't there at the moment, but what he has done over the last 3 years, from a ground you probably went to thinking, you know what, we can unsettle these guys, to a ground where they're just unflappable.
Well, that comes from 30 years of, I won't say misery, because they did have a lot of success in the Champions League, but they had a long periods in that 30 years where there some short periods where they were very, very good, but they had long periods where they were continuously disappointed. So fans are going to a ground and they've have that feeling of being disappointed. They bring that with them. What this guy has done, Klopp, has come in and he's just galvanised the whole thing. He really has, his big, powerful personality, big, strong guy. He's come in and said, this is Liverpool, we don't leave early. You support your team right in the dying minute. But then he's obviously provided evidence that is possible. I mean, one of the jokes that was going around about Klopp was the day he made against West Brom, he made all the players do that saluting the crowd thing.
For a 2-2 draw.
For a 2-2 draw. And then that was a stick that he was beaten with pretty regularly over the last number of years. But it was a message to the fans that, we're not perfect, but we try and we're doing our damnedest to get this team back to where it is. And the fans kind of would buy into that and they'd go, we drew 2-2. And on the face of it, 2-2 at West Brom, well, what are you doing over here? Get in there and go training. But it was almost a case of, listen, we stuck at this game and we have our flaws, but I tell you what, we give everything that we have and we're on the path to going somewhere. So that's what he's done. He's got the fans back on side. He's got them believing again. He's, when we first got the job, there was pictures of him sitting in Liverpool pubs having pints or eating fish and chips, or a cafe, I think it was, having a fry-up or something like that. And a lot of people might dismiss that as kind of PR for Liverpool and stuff like that. But I think he seems like a genuine kind of fella, where he would go walk into a bar, order a pint of John Smith's and sit down with you,
Do managers go into the opposition dressing rooms after games at Premier League level?
I've had it, yeah.
Did the last time around when you beat Liverpool 2-1, did he arrive in?
No, he caught us coming up the steps, really, because after it was his first defeat. And we'd won, and obviously we went over to our fans and we spent 5 minutes there, applauding our fans. So by the time we got back in Liverpool, we were in their changing room, and as we were coming up those old steps underneath the Anfield sign, I was giving it the old woo, you know what I mean? And I genuinely wasn't doing it to wind up Liverpool. Honestly, I wasn't. but he took exception to that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when you come up the steps, the home changing room is there and the away changing room is here. So we came up the steps, and just as we were turning right, I tell you, the door flung open at a pace, and your man, and he's a big man, he's 6'4", I'd say, and he came out and he had the scowl on him and the glasses were on, and he just stared, and I went, ooh. But he took exception to that.
Right.
That we were disrespecting unintentionally, that maybe we were disrespecting, well, I was anyway, but I didn't care. I just kind of looked at him and went, quickly got a changing. But
you weren't going to square up to him.
Right.
What's the problem?
But you could tell that, I understood there now, because when he came up to change room, I thought, oh shit, maybe I have slightly disrespect, and I didn't want, that wasn't my intention at all.
Yeah.
And we were just chuffed that we won 2-1 at Anfield. How many people can say they've won a game at Anfield? It's a big thing. But I quickly quietened down and almost kind of noddily went, I didn't mean any disrespect, and I quickly got in my changing room.
So you think of your attitude when you used to go to Anfield, and you look at, say, 10 days ago, Crystal Palace, who had been in brilliant form, come to Anfield, literally don't touch the ball in the Liverpool penalty area for the entire game. Aston Villa come to Anfield today, little or no ambition but to come away somehow with a 0-0 draw. Psychologically, do you think opponents' attitude towards going to Anfield has changed dramatically over the last 3 years?
Absolutely. You look at the way Liverpool start games of football. I remember reading a stat, I can't remember the exact stat, but they had a large chunk of their games won within the first 11, 12 minutes. That if Liverpool got in front, they just come up the traps quickly and they just blow you away. Like Manchester United do under Ferguson. It was the same thing. They would just come up the traps and just say, you're not getting settled here. This is our house. A bit like me walking up the steps that time. This is my house, you don't come into my house and disrespect me. You beat me, but you don't disrespect me. And I think he has that attitude. And when a manager has that, I've always said I'm a big believer that teams take on the personality of their managers. And he felt that if someone was showing a little bit of disrespect in our house, I'm not standing for that. I'm going to swing that door open and I'm going to stare down whoever is doing it, because this is my house. And I have a lot of respect for that, and that looks like the type of guy that he is.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football is back.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, interesting stuff there from Damien Delaney talking about the death stare from Jurgen Klopp. He hasn't had to use the death stare too often, Eoin. That whole point they make about teams coming and not really going for it that much. Villa were okay in portions of the early part of the game, but they're a team shorn of confidence, and once the cavalry arrived in the form of the subs, there was only going to be one winner.
Yeah, for sure. The death stare really is only something Jeff Shreves has encountered, I think, with Jurgen Klopp in recent times, and that just adds a whole element of hashtag narrative around these games. How is he going to respond to Jeff Shreves, kind of like Mark O'Neill and Tony O'Donoghue back in the day? But yeah, Aston Villa, it's one of those. It was kind of reminded me of the Chelsea performance where they went ahead in that game against the run of play. That there is something about this team that you say to yourself, they definitely have the Premier League quality. They just don't really have the Premier League street smarts. And as a Villa fan, you must be pretty worried at this point that it's just not going to click for them in time, because...
Yeah, well, they've got Palace, so they've got Man United and then Palace. You could assume they're going to lose against Man United. Talk about Man United in a moment, but the Palace game is like a cup final, and if they win that, it'll put a bit of pressure on Watford, who are also not very good at the moment. If you remember back to the game when they beat Everton at Villa Park and the atmosphere was amazing, it was like, oh, it's great to have it back. They are one of those teams who are definitely a little bit hindered by the fact that the stadium's empty, because the whole to end might be something as the manager who is a supporter rallies the troops, or maybe it's one of those teams that would have suffered. But data coming through from the Bundesliga suggests that home advantage has been completely wiped out by the absence of crowds, so you don't get hometown decisions from the referees anymore. And actually players are playing worse at home than they would have traditionally. They're having more passes, which means they're a little more reluctant to move the ball forward. So it's going to be interesting to see if there are any other trends coming from the Premier League that mirror the Bundesliga? You would assume they are, and Villa seem to be one of those teams who have suffered from not playing in front of their own crowds. Obviously yesterday would have been at Anfield, so kind of a moot point, but up to this point they definitely haven't benefited from it.
Yeah, I was just about to say it would have been 5-0 Liverpool yesterday had there actually been crowds involved at Anfield.
I think that there would have been such a carnival atmosphere that there would have been ole, ole, and Liverpool, particularly after being beaten, being mullered during the week, that actually, I don't know. Maybe the fans who were attacking the Royal Library building because it was blue instead of red with the fireworks might not have created the feverish atmosphere at Anfield that it has been all season. I'm not sure.
Our footballers, not these chest-beating kind of acts who like to actually perform in front of a carnival atmosphere. Like, is it the sort of thing that to go out and say, God, we are the best, and look how everybody appreciates us so much. Let's go out and smash these minnows to show everybody just how good we are. Is that not something that just lights the fire under them a little bit more? I certainly would have thought so. And I think if you compare, if you take yesterday in isolation, it's sometimes a lot easier to actually be chasing records, having got the main job done, than it is to actually be trying to uphold your end of the bargain like Manchester City are, trying to prove that they are well up there in terms of being the top team, or at least the top 2 team for next season. Doing it against Liverpool is one thing, but actually having the effort to go and do it against Southampton then on the Sunday, who needs to be doing that?
I didn't see that game, but apparently they were pretty good, City.
Yeah. It was just a complete cock-up, really, from everybody involved, with Alexander Zinchenko for the Che Adams goal, which you had Raheem Sterling tearing strips out of him. Nobody in the stadium, but everybody watching at home, watching Zinchenko getting strips torn out of him by Raheem Sterling. Ederson got caught off his line. Ralph Hasenhüttl, what a job he's done this season in terms of reinvigorating that entire squad. And they had the counter pressing off to a tee yesterday, the timing their runs against the Manchester City, playing out from the back plan so well, and it was a dispossession ultimately that won them the game. They've been fun to watch. Danny Ings has been fun to watch. Manchester City, generally have been fun to watch over the last little while, because you always felt that there has been a Pep Guardiola implosion coming, but that's not really based on anything except for the fact that you just look at them not winning something this year, you look at them potentially not being in the Champions League next season, and this idea that he does his 3 years and potentially packs his bags and leaves.
Or they win the Champions League, they win their European case, and Leo Messi joins. Things could go very different directions for that entire era and the future of the club in the next 6 weeks.
Well, I do think that if they manage to get that CAS ban down to 1 year, I think they will manage to keep everybody. They have the best player in the Premier League, possibly one of the most informed players in Europe at the moment. Keeping him is obviously going to be vital in Kevin De Bruyne. And I would suspect that as long as they don't have a 2-year ban from the Champions League, they will be able to keep all those parts, because at least the Premier League is now a character for the next season to try and show everybody that this Liverpool thing, let's not forget that Liverpool were brilliant last season as well, and we beat them. The fact that Liverpool won the Premier League this year is because of our frailties. That's what Manchester City want to show next year, and that is enough of a motivation. It's just that the season after that, they don't have Champions League football. That's where I think they're going to encounter a lot of problems in the transfer market. But then again, maybe the whole pandemic has come at a good time for Manchester City, that if anybody's looking to get out the exit door this year, who's going to be able to pay the wages that Manchester City's players are on? Who's going to be able to prize them away? So good time to get a ban, if any.
Yeah, they've already sold Sané as well. So 9 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. If you want to get in touch with us, you can WhatsApp us 0879 180 180. Let's hear from Brian Kerr. He joined Stephen Doyle yesterday as we brought you live Premier League commentary of West Ham's 2-2 draw with Newcastle. Afterwards, the lads got talking about Manchester United's impressive form.
A lot of people were very impressed by Manchester United's performance against Bournemouth, and you would look at their attack and you would say there's been so many impressive players this season. Rashford, I know, is only coming back from injury, but he's had a good season overall. Greenwood, I know you're a big fan of. He looks absolutely fantastic, and it looks like Pogba and Fernandes are starting to build up a little bit of a partnership there, but it all goes back to the back four, doesn't it? This is possibly they're going to be their big problem going into next season.
Well, I'm not. Well, the back four looks brittle at times, and they've lots of players there. Bally was playing yesterday, and he hasn't looked too well when he has played. Maguire, I think, has generally played well for them. He's made a couple of mistakes in recent matches. There's talk about De Gea certainly not being on the form of previous years. Will he be put under a bit more pressure? Will Henderson come back from Sheffield United as a possible number one before the start of next season? Wan-Bissaka at right back has done okay. I mean, the criticisms of him have been that his crossing hasn't been great, but I think defensively he's done quite well, and Shaw has done quite well. But I think overall what people need to maybe take back some of the criticism they made of Solskjaer and Manchester United earlier in the season. They're on a run now with 16, 17 games unbeaten, playing against good opposition. The front part of the pitch, I mean, the big difference is obviously Fernandes, the sign of Fernandes, the influence he's had in the team, his creativity on the ball, the fact that he's an attacker who scores goals but also makes goals. And other people seem to have kind of suddenly clicked around him. Pogba has come back into the team after all the messing about with him and injured, and is he really injured? Is his ankle that bad that he's out for months? But he's come back and seems to have come on in a combination with Fernandes that's very effective. Matic seems to be like a young boy again, getting around the pitch and being effective. I mean, I've said in commentary this season, as far as I'm concerned, his legs are gone for this level. I thought Fred was actually doing quite well. The front players have been very impressive. Greenwood, Rashford, Martial has hit a bit of form. The goals are flowing, and they're playing with real confidence and a bit of the kind of style that Manchester United fans have been crying out for 3 or 4 seasons. They're playing with that style now. If they can shore up the defence and cut out some of the mistakes that have been made, that have put them under pressure in some games. But look, you know, maybe sometimes you got to sacrifice a little bit at the back to get the entertainment bit and get the attack bit right. You might not be as solid in the middle of the field with the protection for the back four if you want to play with that kind of bravado and out and out attacking play that's often demanded by Manchester United supporters, and put up with a bit of creakiness, let's say, defensively. But you do want your goalkeeper to be more reliable than De Gea has been in the last year or two, compared he was in the 4 previous seasons where he was absolutely outstanding. But you know, I think Solskjaer has done a good job, and he's building a team I'd say astutely and solidly at the moment, that he deserves time to pursue the direction he's going in at the moment.
And just on Mason Greenwood, I know he was featured on Match of the Day last night. All of the former England strikers getting very excited, Gary Lineker and Ian Wright. But look, they gave a list of 18-year-old strikers, English strikers that scored double figures. The only ones apart from him were Wayne Rooney, Robbie Fowler and Michael Owen, who did it twice. Are they right to get carried away about him? Do you think he's the real deal? You've seen him play live.
You have to be impressed with what he's done in recent weeks, particularly. I mean, when I saw him in the early rounds, they were using him in the Europa League early on the season, and he scored some goals. The opposition wasn't top notch by any means. He scored a few very clever goals on the near post, beating the goalkeeper on his right foot on the near post. Looked like a lad with potential. Of all the young players they used in the Europa League this year, which they were getting them through those games, he looked the one who was ready, I thought, to step up. And when he's played in the Premier League and when he's come on in games, he looks like he has the physicality, he has the pace, he has a bit of maturity about him, and most of all, he has the ability to score goals on either foot, on either side. He doesn't seem to get ruffled when he gets a bit of time, and when he doesn't have too much time, he seems to be able to adjust his feet and body quick enough to get the shot away before the defenders adjust. And that's what we saw yesterday, particularly on the second goal when he was being forced away out towards the sideline, his right hand side. He flashes the shot back into the goal, across the goalkeeper off his right foot. Brilliant goal. So, you know, I think people are right to be enthused about him. I don't think anyone's gone too mad at the moment, but he looks like he's going to be a real player. And it's not easy to break through at Manchester United, a club who are well able to purchase players at the top of the market, but he looks like one, along with Rashford, who's another one of their own who's come through in recent years. He looks like a real deal.
And to finish that top 4 race, how do you kind of see it going now? Chelsea, Leicester, United. Is it between those 3 now for those 2 places outside City and Liverpool?
Well, that's what it looks like, doesn't it? It looks like obviously Liverpool and City are away, and the other 3 for 2 spots. Leicester falling off a little bit will be a relief. They got a couple of results now. Chelsea still very much in the reckoning. I'm playing well. I thought in the game at Manchester City they were outstanding in that game. They were a bit vulnerable defensively, but it was a great game, and it was a great performance when they had to play in the counter-attack when City were coming at them. They showed exciting attacking qualities. Mount is a good player, Willian in great form. Again, yesterday we saw Willian in superb form again. So I think that's going to be a tight one, and it's going to go to the end. But they look the most likely. Arsenal are a bit hit and miss. Yes, they put a couple of results together, but they're too far off. Spurs are miles off. Wolves lost out yesterday, so they're drifting away. Sheffield United, I don't think they'll have enough either. I think you're right in saying 3 for 2. And that should keep an interest in it until the end of the season.
Well, all those 4 involved playing against each other in the last day, so isn't it Wolves, Man U, Chelsea against Leicester?
Well, you're looking far ahead of it than I am. I haven't looked that far. I'm looking week to week. I'm getting dizzy with the number of matches that are on at the moment. What were yesterday's matches? Oh, there's 4 today. Many's tomorrow. Well, we on tomorrow. So, you're well done. You're well ahead of it.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Whatever about exactly where the league table sits at the moment, irrespective of that, Manchester United fans will be heading into next season unbelievably excited by the prospect of what that team is capable of doing, Eoin.
Oh, unbelievable, yeah. And like Mason Greenwood, well flagged throughout the season, from early doors of the season, that this kid had huge potential. I think a lot of people are surprised by how well he has sustained this form throughout the resumption of football. And like, there was stories on the resumption of football that he'd put on 3 kilograms of muscle, all located in his quads, biceps and triceps, and with less high intensity training during the lockdown, he managed to focus on bulking up. But he was bulking up a pretty powerful engine already. It seemed that he was known as a kid for his powerful shooting ability off both feet. There was like an athletic piece done before Christmas where his friends from home were saying that he used to get called in by his mom for an innocent smoothie every day when he was a kid, and they should have bought shares in the company. So obviously that was the rocket fuel that powered this guy when he was a kid. And like this, it's interesting how this kind of represents what Manchester United have chosen to do over the last little while. Apparently he tackled Alexis Sanchez in training, did not go down well with Sanchez at the time, was pretty pissed off with this cheeky kid going in hefty on him in training. And we all know where Sanchez is now. We all know where that career path is going to lead him. They would probably pay him for the rest of his contract to not play for Manchester United because they have a genuine superstar in their ranks. The only question now really is, we see another story yesterday that nobody else is knocking on the door for Jadon Sancho at Dortmund except for Manchester United. 120 million quid is what it's going to cost. You probably don't shell out 120 million quid at this point, given how good Greenwood looks. And it's interesting how the comparisons have changed over the last couple of months. When he scored that goal against Chelsea, was it, at the start of the calendar year, he was compared to Solskjaer. Then it was Van Persie. Then we realised he also has a right foot. And now it's the comparisons with Wayne Rooney. So the hyperbole exists, and the hype train has certainly left the station.
Why are they not calling him the new Mbappe? A teenager who's going to be able to sustain this season after season after season. That's the dream, right? The dream scenario here is that you can save yourself that 120 million and invest it somewhere else. The one counterpoint is that actually having another player in the mix who can play in those positions means that everybody gets a little bit of rest, and you're going to be fighting campaigns on multiple fronts. So let's get a situation here where you're not reliant on a kid and Rashford, whose form has been streaky, and Anthony Martial, who his form has been streaky. So all of a sudden, actually, whenever somebody is being a little bit streaky, you can take them out of the front line, give them a bit of a rest.
Yeah, I think you probably have to look at the level they need to reach in terms of that streakiness, and Liverpool obviously set the standard. And what has happened with Liverpool is that 2 of the front 3 have put in outrageous numbers every single season, so they've actually dovetailed perfectly. None of them have been bad in any season, don't get me wrong, but when you had Mo Salah scoring 50 goals, the other 2 could drop off, or you had somebody in the middle. Like Manchester United need one of those players to score 30 to 40 goals in a season. There's no guarantees that is going to happen at any point yet, but they've all showed the possibility to do so. You probably have to say Martial is the least likely to do that, despite the fact that he's been in brilliant form recently. Like Rashford obviously has been hit and miss at times this season, but he's clearly shown the quality in the past that he can be an unbelievable goal scorer. He's obviously been shifted into a different position at times this season, which hasn't helped. But then over the last couple of weeks, you're looking at Greenwood, and the way he's scoring goals is particularly impressive. I think he's completely outperforming his expected goals tally at the moment. That would probably come more into line. But at the same time, he's got 2 rockets attached to his limbs at the moment, it seems. He can score from anywhere in the box. So it's just an unbelievable weapon that United have crafted.
Yeah, what a great time to be a Man United fan. Who would have been saying that last October, November, when it was week to week about whether or not Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was going to get sacked? Here we are, 21 minutes past 8 this Monday morning. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. You can watch us on otbsports.com on our website. Of course, the best thing to do now is search for OTB Sports in the App Store or on Google Play and download the app. And that way you can have our content in your ears all afternoon. Just hit the radio button and we're live essentially for 24 hours. We are at the point now where we're going to talk about the sports pages this morning.
OTB AM.
Forgot where I was for a second there. OTB brief, Saints beat City, power surge fades, crazy F1 restart. Every morning we provide an outline of exactly what's going on in the world of sport. You can subscribe to that podcast on our app. It's called the OTB Brief, and it sets you up for the day, tells you what fixtures are on, what results you might have missed from the night before. Clubs are going to take Mings before Grealish. This is Damien Delaney. That's not necessarily about not liking Grealish, but he's big fan of Tyrone Mings and just reckons that they'll be haggling about the price for Grealish, whereas somebody, potentially Spurs, are going to come in and take Tyrone Mings because he has what it takes to play in the Premier League. Greenwood's finishing makes him the real deal. It's Brian Kerr, as we've just heard. And yet to be convinced, Graham Souness, not a fan just yet of Jack Grealish. He was making the point that Grealish keeps getting fouled because he's on the ball too much, that actually, if there was anybody around him, well, I don't know if it was anybody around him that could actually pass the ball to, or if he's not seeing things enough. And then I just want to draw your attention to this. Forever young, Shane Dowling leaves us wanting just a little bit more. He joins the 27 club. Arthur James O'Dea has written that piece about the end of the Shane Dowling era as he retires at the age of 27. Great piece published yesterday morning on the OTB Sports app.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with an interesting one here by John Fogarty. Criminal case being built around online Clare GAA abuse. So this is a criminal case relating to alleged online abuse of Clare GAA Secretary Pat Fitzgerald and other county officials is at an advanced stage. So the Gardaí are involved. They've confirmed to the paper that the investigation into a request made by the Clare County Board is ongoing and a file is currently being prepared for the DPP. So this is something that you've got Pat Fitzgerald quotes here talking about faceless individuals, anonymous trolls online, criticising him in quite vitriolic and poisonous ways over the past few years. His son Davy has obviously said that there should be legislation put in place for cyberbullying, and this is something that Clare GAA officials and managers have had to deal with for quite some time. So that investigation is at an advanced stage. Got a photograph there of John Egan celebrating his first Premier League goal yesterday as well. What a strike it was. Wilder once more after Egan nets goals in all 4 divisions, which is the latest statistic that he's managed to rack up. And Mourinho warns Arsenal to stick to own affairs. So this is after Arsenal posted a tweet mocking Tottenham Hotspur's defeat at Sheffield United last Thursday. And Jose Mourinho has had a pop at the kid who looks after their Twitter account, basically. Although he does say it probably wasn't Mikel Arteta who posted the tweet. So,
but you don't know. You don't know.
Leaving a little bit of room for doubt.
Arteta's sitting there with the Twitter account live, the TikTok account live, the Instagram account live, and he's just like,
I'm pretty
Constantly.
sure. Pretty sure Mikel Arteta actually live tweets the goals during games as well from the sideline. The only other story then from the Irish Examiner is where would Ballydoyle be without their modest genius? So it was a pretty interesting weekend at Epsom, really. Aidan O'Brien with another classic success. Donegal O'Brien with his first classic success yesterday. So that's what Tommy Lyons is writing about, and that is the Irish Examiner.
Yeah, not a bad weekend for the O'Briens. The Irish Independent back page there. Egan's edge. What an incredible story John Egan's career is. I don't know if everybody fully understands just the horrific injury that he suffered. I remember doing the VO for a documentary, and they were following him for the year, and he was out on loan and did this horrific injury and basically was kind of sat alone playing PlayStation for 6 or 9 months before he makes a comeback and re-establishes his potential. Because sometimes with those injuries, you never get back to the level that you thought you were going to be at in the first place. And here he is, bestriding the Premier League like a colossus. CBC Capital Six Nations Investment could net IRFU 75 million windfall. Do you think this is good timing or bad timing for the announcement of this deal, Eoin?
Oof, that's a tricky question. I would have to say good timing.
For
I
who?
would have to say it's excellent. Okay, so sorry, I actually can't see Ger's face here. Just to make that clear to everybody. So that was obviously a sarcastic, rhetorical question, was it? Is this? Are you suggesting that this is excellent timing for the players? And
well, I'm sure the IRFU were going, could you not just have waited a week, lads? Let us get the deal done. Just shut up. Everybody shut up about it. This is like the scene in Goodfellas where the wife arrives in the mink and Jimmy Burke, is that his name? Goes over and rips the mink off her and goes, what are you doing? Well, that guy ends up dead in a trailer. That's what I know. That's what I know about that guy. He ends up dead in a trailer in Goodfellas.
It's the councillor in Ozark who drives the Lamborghini.
Yeah.
That's the one. The guy in Better Call Saul with the Hummer. It's a well-worn path. This is in kind of any mobster movies or television shows. So you're suggesting that this is excellent news from a player standpoint.
If only the French could keep their mouths shut for a week so we can get this deal done with the players, cut them by 20%, and then reveal we've got 75 million quid in the bank. Yes, but no, that hasn't happened. 75 million quid's a lot of money, and it's gone up in the time of the coronavirus. Fair play to the Six Nations for getting an even better deal from CBC here. It's gone from a reported 333 million to 450 over 5 years. And, you divide that and whatever. Does everybody get exactly the same? Maybe they do. 75 million quid each over 5 years, an extra 15 million. Are the players going to take a 20% pay cut? And they're like, look at the money. I can see the money. It's like right there. They're backing the big Brinks truck up and they're showing it into your account, and then you're going to put it into our account. And that's how that works. It's not great timing if you're the IRFU of this story coming out today, is it? If you're the players...
No, at the same time, I mean, the money has yet to reach resting point in their account. Like, this is all prospective cash. The IRFU don't have this money, so it's not like it totally weakens their negotiating position.
As Trapattoni would say, the cat is no in the sack.
No, it certainly isn't. Is Laporte somebody who wields enough power for his words to matter this much?
Yes.
Possibly.
Yes.
Possibly.
Yes.
So when you see these sort of stories, you tend to believe that the wheels will get in motion when someone like Laporte backs it.
Right. Times Ireland.
London Times is, I was silenced on racism. Hamilton's regret at not speaking out sooner. Britain accused over Austrian Grand Prix crash. So Lewis Hamilton wearing a Black Lives Matter T-shirt while taking a knee yesterday. A few of his co-drivers decided not to take a knee, and he says, I was silenced on racism when looking to make some sort of big support for Colin Kaepernick during his protest, and he was basically told to shut up and drive. Lampard keen to sign Rice, meanwhile. So Declan Rice could be on his way to Chelsea. And it's interesting, the first sentence on this piece, Chelsea has set their sights on Declan Rice and believe he has the potential to be the next John Terry. So very much the centre-back avenue is what's been explored with Declan Rice over the last little while. And also, rugby to trial fewer subs, writes Martin Ziegler. So Sir Bill Beaumont and Eddie Jones, two of the high-profile backers here, to reduce the substitutes to replacements in rugby from 8 to 5 or 6. Because this apparently would make the game more open in the second half, because players would be more fatigued. Surely if players are more fatigued, should you not be looking at it that 8 subs is probably required? But it's something that might be trialled when rugby is back, fewer subs.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, it would seem to make a bit more sense, but also maybe make it easier and cheaper for clubs to have smaller squads. The Irish Times for you this morning there. Donncha O'Brien takes first classic as Fancy Blue wins French Oaks. There is a picture of Valtteri Bottas, who wins the instant-packed first race of the new season. I even watched about 10 minutes of the Formula One, Eoin, over the weekend.
You did?
I did.
Wow.
IRFU in line for 75 million windfall from CBC, so the story is out. Everybody has it. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money resting in their account. DeChambeau's transformation raises questions, but who will ask? This is an interesting column today from Malachy Clerkin. So Bryson DeChambeau went on a rampage, a rant against so he had a bad shot in a bunker, and the camera followed him, because obviously there are cameras following each of the three balls during the course of the tournament, because there are like featured groups. So the cameraman was doing his job and followed DeChambeau, getting angry, and he then went on this rant. Oh, why are you doing it? Why are you following me? Why are you watching me the whole way through? That was on Saturday. And then on Sunday, obviously, wins the tournament. But people are wondering about his size. So here's how Malachy Clerkin talks about it. If golf isn't your bag, consider the following scenario for someone in your own sport. Imagine an athlete doesn't compete in public for 2 months, as was the case with DeChambeau between October and December of last year. Imagine that upon his return at the President's Cup team event in Australia, the clothes for which he'd been fitted earlier in the year are now too tight. His neck size has gone out by 1 inch, his chest size by 2. Imagine this athlete putting on 1.5 stone of muscle mass in 2 months and not stopping there. Now, a lot of us will have, experienced lockdown and put on similar amounts of weight, but not in pure muscle, not the way Bryson has done it. This wasn't banana bread. Spin the tape along and imagine the pandemic hitting the following spring and giving everyone, said athlete included, 3 more months to go away and prepare however they please for the resumption of their sport. Imagine that athlete then coming back with another 1.5 stone of muscle on him, making it somewhere in the ballpark of 3 stone added in 9 months. I mean, and he's hitting the ball far. Looks good, our Bryson. He looks good. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite a statistical feat it is. I know he's big into his numbers, Bryson DeChambeau, big into his science, and he's obviously managed to get his life off to a fine art. And I look forward to reading the self-help book that is due to hit our shelves this Christmas. I'm sure he has to cash in on this, because
the diet's amazing.
Some feat.
10 drives of over 350 yards for the entire week. Nobody else in the field had more than 5. And at this point where the libel laws insist, it's made clear there is no suggestion that DeChambeau has done anything untoward in gaining all this bulk. So he's been posting footage of his daily gym sessions, etc. But that doesn't mean the question shouldn't be asked. So there you go. Malachy Clerkin asking the question. And I'm sure golf will begin to ask the question, because golf is into asking these hard questions of the people who... no, wait, I'm only joking. Golf doesn't care.
Irish Daily Star this morning is a triple frown. New low for Pep as City crash at Saints. Is it a new low? I'm not sure about that. It's a game that doesn't matter. Actually laying down a marker, to use that terrible phrase, last Thursday would have been slightly significant against Liverpool, but actually going to St Mary's and putting in a performance, not as significant. Briotti wants punishments. Meanwhile, this is CPA chief Micheál Briotti, who says he wants the training ban and calling training ban cheating rather, and equating it to doping. It's no different than doping, he said in that interview on Midwest yesterday. Klopp's chasing history. Meanwhile, Jurgen Klopp insisted there will be no let up from his newly crowned champions in their bid to seal a record-breaking season. And the other story on the back of the Irish Daily Star this morning is Gavin, his all to the cause. It's former Dublin manager Jim Gavin, running by the finishing tape held by Dublin footballer and secretary of the Dublin Neurological Institute, Rebecca MacDonald, during their run yesterday, their Dublin Neurological Institute 150-kilometre frontline run at Eccles Street. So a great feat by Jim Gavin there, who manages to get over the line and doing plenty with his spare time away from being Dublin boss.
He looks in pretty good shape. It doesn't say if he ran the whole 150k, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised to find that he had done that kind of, in his spare time, while also flying planes and keeping us all safe in the air. So, but he does look in pretty good shape for somebody there. We'll talk about Micheál Briotti in just a moment. That's the Star. I've got the Mirror for you here. And that is it. Record players. Reds vow no let up and bid to rewrite the record books after scrapping to a gritty victory over Villa. Hamilton hits the buffers. Ole Mason can be a Euros lion cub, and West Ham a sickener for Moyes. Yeah, it does look like David Moyes is actually doing a reasonable job at West Ham. They're playing good football and scoring goals, and I think they're going to be safe. So it'll be interesting to see if he is, given a little bit of time, if he's actually capable of getting back to the level that he was at when he was the Everton manager. Yeah,
it was kind of like a hilarious sort of FML moment for David Moyes yesterday when they conceded that equaliser, when he'd been exasperated by the behaviour of Pablo Fornals, who had played the entirety of the opposition onside by about 10 metres and still had the temerity to put his hand up, scream at the linesman and say, "What are you doing not calling that offside?" despite being guilty of sin. So he's got a little bit of that to deal with, David Moyes, but he's not doing a bad job. Back page of the Irish Sun is Klopp saying, "Forget records." Jurgen urges players not to overthink things. Lewis Hamilton says, "I'll fight on for Black Lives Matter." Che in the big leagues, that's Che Adams and his winner for Southampton yesterday. The Irish Sun is also doing the best Limerick 15 of the last 20 years in hurling. And Alan Shearer says Jose has to get it right, and quickly. The Mail this morning, history makers, Klopp keeps his cool as records ready to tumble. Gosling still upbeat as star Enable suffers just third career loss, and Kelly warns counties against bending rules. That's Sean Kelly, the former GAA president, is warning counties against bending the training rules. The Guardian this morning leads with Lewis Hamilton as well. "Back then, I was silenced." Hamilton reveals regret after being warned off past protests. Broad at risk of missing out. Pace of Wood and Archer is the latest on English cricket team, as ever, on the back of The Guardian. And then a couple of other pieces as well. Back on track, Mane strikes first as Reds finally see off wasteful Villa. And Paul Parker says, "I was always looking over my shoulder for skinheads." And the Telegraph, Hamilton to keep taking the knee. F1 champion, one of 14 drivers to make gesture before race. So not everybody, not an entirely united paddock in Formula One, but it's a good start from Lewis Hamilton trying to get people to pay attention to the world that they live in. The Racing Post leads with the family tradition. Donegal, the latest O'Brien, to train the winner of a classic. And you've also got making sense of a derby like no other. Our experts, says the Racing Post, on a classic that left some baffled, bewildered and bemused. A very unusual start and finish to the race there at Epsom on Saturday. And the back of the Racing Post is Harry's game, ace marksman Kane, the man to get Spurs firing again. It's Spurs against Everton at 8 o'clock tonight. The Heralds this morning. The Coleman's Euro goal. Everton skipper targets Champions League spot, so Everton are beginning to dream that Carlo Ancelotti is actually more than the Italian Big Sam, and he's got them playing good football. He's certainly got Seamus Coleman playing great football at the moment, so we need break from club versus county row. Go with the flow, urges Dublin under-20s boss Gray, and brilliant finish for Egan. Said he hadn't kicked a ball that cleanly since his Gaelic football days. I mean, we don't get enough love for Gaelic football in the association football ranks. We just save all our comparisons for rugby. It's about high time that John Egan managed to bring Gaelic football into. It's the other way around as well. It's like Pat Spillane going, geez, you wouldn't see that in the World Cup now whenever player X scores a penalty. This is essentially in the 90s. Most of the 90s was people going, geez, you wouldn't see that now in the Premiership. In the First Division. The Irish News this morning is Red Hand Rafferty setting his sights on league title. This is Tyrone prospect Liam Rafferty, who set his sights on the league title because, of course, Tyrone still well in contention if action is to return in October as planned. And then the other story there is Klopp says focus is not on records as Reds return to winning ways. So, I'm going to tell you what's on the OTB Sports app for you this morning. You've got to search OTB Sport in the App Store and you can download it free, gratis and for nothing. Forever Young, Shane Dowling leaves us wanting just a little bit more is the lead story on the app this morning. You can scroll down in your own feed, you personalise it for whatever stories and whatever sports you're most interested in. You can click on the radio and watch us on video, or you can subscribe to any of our podcasts. And when the events come back, which they will, because, you know, people are, well, let's wait and see exactly what happens with events and crowds after you all went a bit crazy at the weekend, apparently, and there's been a stern talking to from various people. So a few stories that we want to talk to. The Micheál Brodie piece, I think, is particularly interesting. He was on, was it Midwest Radio? Yes. Talking yesterday, the comparison, teams training, he compares it to doping and it says it's cheating. And to be honest,
we said this a little bit on the show last week. It is essentially cheating. You are saying that the rules don't apply to you. Were you away for most of the Conor McKenna stuff when this is typical Victorians? They think the rules don't apply to them the way they do to everybody else in Australian rules. Like inter-county managers, this is typical inter-county managers. They think the rules don't apply to them, and it is kind of cheating. We should call it out for what it is, right? He's right.
I guess so. Like the only kind of comparison with doping that I would have had in my head was kind of back to the earlier point of actually tracking down the cheaters, tracking down those who've actually trained before September 14th, because we are, as I said, dependent on those people calling out their own fellow county folk for actually breaking the rules, which isn't exactly a great system for doing so. Like a whereabouts system is the only way you could actually police this properly, as in the whereabouts system that they would have in anti-doping. But is that a stretch? Is that something that could possibly be implemented in Gaelic games? I'm not sure it is.
Well, so that was the story yesterday, though. In fairness, Professor Jack Anderson had tweeted about this, and Philip Lanigan tracked him down and spoke to him, and it was in yesterday's Mail on Sunday, where he was saying that there's potential here for the whereabouts issue to be quite a serious one. Sport Ireland obviously need to know exactly when you're training and where you're training so that they can rock up unannounced and do some out-of-competition testing. Otherwise, the players won't receive the grants that are part of the government scheme to pay sports people to do sport in Ireland. And that whereabouts has to be declared somewhere. So the whereabouts system would actually be the easy way for us to get around this and say, yeah, we are. Because otherwise the players won't get their grants if they're caught not fulfilling the criteria. So suddenly maybe it's in the GPA's interests to have their players report, yeah, we're training or we're not training.
Yeah, like if that's something that's been done in the past, obviously, then they can keep doing it. I didn't realise that was actually the case, to be quite honest. So that does change things a bit. It doesn't then come down to people having to kind of snitch on their own county people. Like it would be great if this was taken out of the hands of county boards and county managers and players. Like they're never, especially the players and managers, never going to report an early training session. County boards as well, given the punishment that will be put on them, also highly unlikely. Like if a high-profile team crashes out early of Northern Ireland Championship this year, there will probably be a little bit of public pointing of fingers at the county board saying you could have done more, they're disgraced. There was always that sort of thing. It's not just the county manager who gets berated.
You should have had them training secretly, essentially. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of. Like we need, I would say that trusting the county boards to actually snitch on their own county teams for training earlier and trusting everybody to do the right thing is not going to be a sufficient way of enforcing these rules. Like, granted, we have a punishment now, which is the first step in enforcing rules done. The second step is actually finding out how you are going to identify the rules being broken, and I'm just not convinced that that's possible. But if there is a conversation to be had that the whereabouts system can be used for constant, week-to-week checking of where players are, can that be skewed as well, is the only question, and perhaps it can be.
We obviously were digging into this story last week. Derry had stated their position very clearly. Offaly, Michael Duignan talking on OTB had stated their position. So we got Arthur O'Dea and Conor Breslin contacting every football and hurling county board to ask if their inter-county teams were training before the September 14th deadline. They all said no, obviously. They all said, no, we're not. So it's on the record now that they're not doing it and that they haven't been doing it. So we shall wait and see what evidence emerges either to the contrary or to back them up. And just to go into that, make 2020 catalyst for real change for clubs, urges Briode. He's got some great lines in this. The Director General and the President, their time is now. They need to implement change or they need to be held accountable to the association. Accountability is not something that Irish life is very closely associated with, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. He also says, that's where we really see it. It's all there. There's no need for another report. That's akin to Father Ted asking, what's to be said for another mass? He brought up a report from the McNamee report of 1971. That's a long time ago, Eoin. 1971 is a long time ago. And the Strategic Review Committee report of 2002. And both of those reports identify there is a problem with fixtures in the GAA. That's how old the story is. It's a story as old as time itself.
I need to dig out that McNamee report actually, and do kind of a retrospective look at it. Like, I mean, what year do we think we will actually have the report that fixes the fixtures? What needs to be said? What needs to be put into black and white for us to actually wake up and actually make the kind of required changes?
Never let a global pandemic go to waste, I think, is the key lesson for all of us to learn. Right, it is coming up to 8:45. Is there anything else in the papers you want to talk about?
Not particularly that we've mentioned. The only other thing that we've kind of done, Bryson DeChambeau, we've done Jose, we've done the whole Briody, CVC and Lewis Hamilton. But just another quick mention for the beef that is Jose versus Arsenal social media person. That is the thing that we need to keep an eye on over the next little while. That is the story to be developed, I would have thought. It
turns out he actually hates Arsenal. I always assumed it was just Wenger, but it's the whole club, whatever it is that they've done in the past to annoy Jose. There's residuals. Unless it was he hated Wenger so much that anything Wenger is associated with, he now kind of still has to rein on. He did make peace with Wenger on TV that one time, but it did feel like it was one of those, I broke your spirit so often, I now have pity on you relationships, as opposed to a genuine meeting of intellectual minds.
True. Like he did have a pop at the Arsenal there for actually basking in somebody else's misfortune, and he says you mustn't be very successful yourself if you're basking in somebody else's misfortune, but also while kind of having a dig at Arsenal as well. Like I am sure Jose Mourinho would bask in other people's misfortune as much as anybody else. And kind of arguing about European places is something he criticised Arsenal about, or kind of be glorifying the qualification for Europe. If Jose Mourinho manages to qualify for the Champions League this year, which he obviously won't be able to do, or looks like he won't be able to do, then that would be something that he would celebrate. He would do the running up and down the touchline. He would do a Klinsmann slide perhaps in his suit and shirt if they actually qualified for Europe. So slowly but surely, Jose is kind of talking and criticising the very things that perhaps he would be encouraging himself. And I think slowly but surely we're seeing a kind of more of a mediocre career path being carved out, unfortunately, by him.
It's 8:47 this morning here on OTB AM. One last story from me from the papers. Eddie Hearn is backing Zelfa Brown Flash Barrett to shine against Eric Donovan next month. This fight is going to be part of Hearn's fight camp, which I think is in his back garden. He's got a big back garden in Essex on the 14th of August. Barrett's just 26 and has won 23 of his 24 outings. He's the current Commonwealth champion, and Hearn is backing him to be a big star. So it's a huge fight for Eric Donovan. Big step up for him in terms of the people that he's fought before. But if he wins it, then that would really get him where he needs to be. He was part of our Saturday panel on Saturday afternoon, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Before that, though, we're going to talk about the BMW Run Ride for Pieta. A group of us in Team OTB are taking on alongside BMW and Triathlon Ireland on Friday, the 17th of July, which is fairly imminent now. It's Friday week. We're going to be completing a duathlon, which is run, cycle and run again, supporting Pieta House, and is proudly supported by BMW Ireland. We're about to kick off week 5 of our 6-week training programme, and it all ends with live coverage of the duathlon right here on OTB AM on Friday the 17th of July. You didn't do it so you could stay in studio and present the show. Is that what happened, Eoin? Is that's how this all happened?
Took one for the team.
Why did you slither away from this? Why could you not do it?
I don't know. I can't be bothered, to be totally honest with you, but thank you for representing the team.
I mean, you know, it would have given your life a much needed focus over the last while.
A bit more meaning is what you're saying? Are you saying I lack meaning, direction?
Trying to help you out, you know? Like, we all need a little jump start sometimes, a bit of coaching along the way. It's not too late, really.
I feel like I should be lying down in a therapist's chair while having this question.
No, that's different. That's like, that's prescriptive. This is coaching. There's a difference. This is helpful.
What are your qualifications?
You could do it. You could still do it. You could definitely. I mean, it's actually going to be grand. You're a runner anyway, right? Are you?
I've given away my bike, and I was a runner there until I went on holidays and I stopped running for a couple of weeks. So, this is going to be a great opportunity for you, for the whole team, to go out there and enjoy yourself while I keep the show on the road from studio.
We've been checking in with various coaches and experts over the last few weeks from Triathlon Ireland to help us along the way. But up next, we're going to be joined by Karen Kavanagh and her son Sheahan from the Athy Triathlon Club, who are both taking part in the BMW Run Ride for Pieta, and we're going to hear how they're getting on as well. Before that, though, I do want to bring you our Saturday panel clip from Anya O'Gorman, Eric Donovan, who I was just talking about there, and rugby player Ian Nagle all joined you, Eoin, to talk about taking breaks in the middle of their sporting careers. Here's Anya O'Gorman about the balancing act of trying to play football and live a normal life.
Looking at your friends going on leaving cert holidays and you're unable to do so because of sporting commitments, does that change as you get older? Do you look at, I don't know, family occasions or social occasions and feel that envy as well, or did that dissipate over time?
Like, I don't think at the time when I didn't go on a 6-year holiday it was a big problem for me, because my focus was just on playing football and that's all I wanted to do. But I think as you get older, then you do start to miss out things. And I think obviously the professional players are in a different boat, but us as amateurs playing in Ireland, we're obviously trying to juggle work and playing at that high level and trying to be an elite athlete. So that's a massive, massive commitment. And previous to the last few years, like, we were taking unpaid days leave off work, and eventually does take its toll on you as well. And you're missing out on these family occasions, and then you kind of take a step back and look and reflect, and you're kind of just thinking, what direction is my life going after football? As well. And I think that's something that you don't really consider when you're younger. What am I going to do when after football, after all these commitments, taking all these days off, like you need to try and buy a house, get a mortgage, just little things like that as well, that we're not lucky to be in the same boat that maybe our male counterparts are in England, that they're earning huge and massive amount of money that might set them up for after. But I think sometimes that they do fall over come across them barriers as well, going over a young age without their education. So yeah, it's just a massive balancing act, I think.
That's Anya O'Gorman on the Saturday panel there, and you can actually see Eric Donovan right beside her as well. So you should subscribe to that on the OTB Sports app. Now, I'm delighted to say Karen Kavanagh is with us, who's partaking in the duathlon. Karen, how are you getting on? What's the crack?
I'm good. Good to talk to you, Ger.
How far along are you? Because I know people join this at different stages. Are you doing yours next week as well?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I'm just going into weeks 5 of it, so
right.
2 weeks left.
Right. And have you been good in following the actual prescribed? Have you done the run and cycle on the same day yet?
I have. I followed the program from the last 4 weeks. So last week we had to put the run and the cycle together. And so I did that, the 5K run and the 10K bike together. And then this week we have to do the 15K bike and the 5K run after it. So that is always more difficult, coming off the bike and into the run. The legs are like jelly. So this will probably be more challenging this week.
Have you? Go on, yeah.
Yeah, I've probably been lucky that I have done a good few duathlons before. And so it's kind of a bit practice before, but duathlon, so I do know what those jelly legs feel like. And hopefully a few brick sessions, like a cycle run sessions, do help get rid of those jelly legs and do prepare you to go now onto the run.
So look, as you know, we're novices to this. Explain what's a brick session.
A brick session is a run, cycle, run, cycle, run. So maybe you just go out for a short run,
right?
Maybe a 1.5K run, and then maybe do a 5K bike, and then maybe a 1.5K run and 5K bike, and just keep practicing maybe 3 of each. And it's fantastic. It does help getting off the bike onto the run, because you think you come off the bike and you think the legs will move for you, but sometimes they won't do what you want them to do. But if you practice it a bit, it does get easier. The jelly legs, to be honest, when you're coming off the bike. Even if you're going out for a cycle anytime, I'd always try to, when I come back from even a long cycle, go out for maybe a 1K run straight after a 500-metre run. It just would help get rid of the jelly legs. Even taking part in a duathlon or a triathlon, either, when you come off the bike, it will help.
Have you done triathlon before then?
Yeah, no, I'm a member of a Thai triathlon club, so I have been doing triathlons for a good few years now. Okay, just always wanted to just get to the finish line. Wouldn't be winning medals or on the podium or anything, but just really enjoying the sport and enjoying the competitive aspect and also the social aspect of it as well.
Yeah, the social aspect was something that we didn't really fully appreciate until we were down in Dunmore East and kind of saw exactly just the crowd having the crack afterwards.
Yeah, I saw you there, Jared, down there. I saw the 2 teams down there. You were brilliant, and your speech afterwards was fantastic as well. I took part in that triathlon. Dunmore East is a brilliant triathlon to do.
And you
very well run by
You finished the whole thing on your own as opposed to like me.
I did. I got to the finish line, and that's all I hope to do every time. Just get to the finish line and enjoy it with a smile on your face.
It must be an amazing feeling to actually. When was the first one you actually completed? Was it Triathlon?
Triathlon, yeah. That would have been my first introduction. I'd never seen a triathlon until I'd seen Triathlon, and then I looked at it one year and I said, next year I'm going to give that a go. And I probably shouldn't have really been in the river. I really got into the river for the first time in the day. But anyway, we got through it all. And I remember I would have been into GAA in that. And I remember my first triathlon taking part. Louth, I think, were playing Kildare that evening. And I remember it was on a Saturday and had white and red bunting out of my hybrid bike and finishing the bike on it. But really enjoyed it. And since then a Thai triathlon club were formed. Well, before that, maybe about 10 years ago, and I joined that club with my husband. My husband did a triathlon with me that year as well. And since then, 10 years, we're at it now and really, really enjoying it. And our kids are at it as well. My son Sheahan and my daughter Chloe are at it as well. Sheahan is 15 and Chloe is 13.
It's funny, you've obviously kind of seen the explosion in growth over that period of time. And actually, you're a part of the explosion in growth. And I think just how you've talked about it there explains why the sport has gone from being quite niche to actually very mainstream now, is that whole families can do it.
Oh, it's very accessible now. I have to say, I would highly recommend it. It's just a fantastic family sport. And what we're missing most probably during these difficult times are triathlon race days out, where you could be all over the country. It's on beach, lake, river. And it's a small community as well. You've got to know a lot of people. And our kids have made many friends, and my husband and I have as well. And just really enjoy the competitive and the social aspect. And I'd have to congratulate now Triathlon Ireland as well, even during these strange times. They've kept the triathlon community, extremely active. Right since March, online with kukri demonstrations, Pilates, core workouts, strength workouts. And then we're doing Turbo on Zoom, which has been fantastic. We have 2 adult turbo sessions weekly led by Gary Crossan, Leinster Triathlon Ireland Development Officer. And then the juniors, our kids have had 4 junior turbo sessions a week as well.
Right.
So that's been fantastic, so it has as well.
Yeah, I think
and it's good interaction.
You've got your son Sheahan with you as well.
Yeah, I have, yeah. Will I bring him in to you,
Yeah,
Ger?
please, yeah.
Okay.
Hey Sheahan, how are you?
Well, I'm good. How are you?
Who's the fastest in the house?
Oh, I think that'll have to be me.
It's not competitive. Your mum says it's not competitive, but you're 15, so of course it's competitive, right?
Oh yeah, it has to be.
When was your first one?
Must have been
when you were 8, 9, 6 years ago, I think so.
Yeah, about 6 years ago.
Right, and so like really young. And would that have been Triathlon? Were you getting in the river?
Oh no, too young. I was too young for that then.
No, his first involvement, how we got involved, was after my husband and I did our first triathlon. We were involved for 2 or 3 years, and then we saw this advertisement on Triathlon Ireland, a parent and child training session in Dublin, maybe in November, about 6 years ago. And the 4 of us went along to the training session and really enjoyed it. Gary Crossan was giving that training session. Another few families were there as well. And since then, that's how our kids, isn't that right, Sheahan?
Yeah.
Do you remember that first session, Sheahan?
Yeah. I do, yeah.
Kabir, what distance are you doing then, Sheahan? Are you doing the sprint, or have you done the longer one? What's your dream about, like, ultimately, what do you want to do?
Eventually I'd like to complete an Ironman. So this would have been my first year doing a sprint. Then just try age now.
Right, so the duathlon's kind of perfect then as well, because you can...
Yeah.
And how are you finding the training?
It's tough, but sure, I get through it. It's a good feeling when you have it done.
It is, isn't it? Karen, you're giving me a little bit of confidence that we're all going to be able to do this. I think that's a great idea about the brick training.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone can do it. Sure, anyone. To be honest, you're only against yourself, and you can go as easy as you want, as hard as you want. So everyone, even if you had to walk some of it, you'll all get to the finish line.
Yeah, the bit where you're saying you're only against yourself, we've stupidly made it where we're actually having a competition amongst ourselves as well. And that's the bit that I'm most worried about, is that suddenly we're going to get there and we're going to see people and we're going to go off too fast. That's my one concern, is that in the crowd, we'll lose our minds.
Yeah. No, always in the run, that's always the problem. Everyone starts off too fast. No, pace yourself and go off slower. You have to have a bike, and then the last run is always tough.
Yeah, not looking forward to that.
Mentally tough for the last run, but no, just keep thinking of the finish line, and you cannot beat that finish line. No matter how much pain you are during it, you'll never regret it.
Well, listen, you're an inspiration to us both. Best of luck, and look, 2 more weeks to go, and then we're all going to be doing this. So, Karen Kavanagh and Sheahan, thanks a million for joining us this morning. A reminder that it is the BMW Run and Ride for Pieta, proudly sponsored by BMW Ireland, and we're in week 5 of 6. The training plan this week is a 7k run on one day, and then a separate day, it's a 15k cycle and a 5k run on the same day. The BMW Run and Ride for Pieta is taking place on Friday the 17th of July. We're going to be broadcasting our duathlon run live on OTB AM this morning. And still, Eoin quietly there, skulking away in the background, feeling guilty.
I think we neglected to mention, like, it's good that you mentioned the pints after the triathlon in Dunmore last year, but you didn't mention the pints the night before the triathlon last year as well, which is a key component of, getting a few more bits of nutrition sorted before setting out. How are you fixed for it?
The cycling is grand. I did the cycle that, do you remember the first night we went cycling? We went up the Howth, the hill in Howth.
Yeah, I'll probably never forget it.
Well, it turns out that's like 40 kilometres that we did that night, because I like properly put it on Strava. And I didn't do the bit around the corner at the top because I was too tired. But you did that. Did you do it twice?
Yeah, but then I went to like Primavera Music Festival in Barcelona the following week, and that was me done. I'm never quite. I don't think my calves have quite recovered from that night ever.
It's like the Col du Izoard. It's like what? I'd never been up there on the bike before, and I went at the weekend, and so. Not feeling the best at the moment.
So you actually went back up the mountain since?
Yeah, well, for the first time ever since, yeah.
Congratulations.
And I didn't stop this time. That was the first time I've done that. So, look, you get there, The running is going to be an issue, but sure. It turns out we've been inspired this morning. 087 918 180 is the number here if you want to get in touch with us this morning. Use the hashtag OTB AM and stay tuned to our various social accounts to find out how we're doing with our run and ride for Pieta, sponsored by BMW Ireland. We're back with Sheahan, and then we're going to hear from Anthony Moyles about the club versus county debate.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Thursday night football with John Giles.
Johnny Giles is a national treasure. When he speaks, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. When he's on the show, I was in the car the other day, I parked the car and I sprinted into the house and turned on the radio. I love listening to him. I love Johnny Giles.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this?
When that didn't materialise, I think both Paulie and myself probably looked at each other and kind of thought, what next?
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Sheahan, or Dark Horse Sheahan, as he's known in these parts ever since Endacall, reckoned he's actually going to win our BMW Run and Ride for Pieta. Shane, how are you?
Good morning, lads. I take offence to being a dark horse. I would have liked to have been referred to as the red hot favourite.
All right, okay, yeah. Well, look, you've got to just put it out there. Apparently you are the red hot favourite.
Really?
Yeah, by a mile. You're like the fastest, the quickest, the fittest.
Okay, no, I'll take that, yeah.
Where's your danger?
There's a couple of young lads in there that are, like, Endacall is a keen sportsman. Tommy Rooney is a keen GAA player as well. So I think these lads are kind of hiding in the bushes, waiting to pounce. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be too easy for me. And Jerry, your numbers on the bike, let me tell you, I know Nathan brought it up with you last week, but they worry me. The bike worries me.
I'll be like 12 minutes behind you after the 2.5k run, let alone the 5k run. So don't worry about that. I just want to get over the finish line. I'm just going to stalk Nathan and beat him at the last second, like
Don't finish last. Nobody wants to finish last.
No, I mean that's all I'm really interested in. But is Tommy the other main danger? Because he's been keeping on the QT.
Yeah, you see, he's got the fresh, clear air out there over this isolation period, so he's probably getting plenty of hill exercise in as well. So I think Tommy's keeping very quiet. He's not saying a whole pile, which kind of makes me a little bit worried.
It's the quiet ones you always want to be aware of. It's 9:05 here this morning. Shane, what have you got for us?
We'll kick off with the Premier League from last night, lads. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp insisting setting records isn't something they're thinking about. He's lying, of course. The Premier League champions remain on course to win all of their home fixtures in the top flight this season following the 2-0 victory over Aston Villa at Anfield yesterday. Elsewhere yesterday, Manchester City lost 1-0 at Southampton to make it 3 straight away defeats in the league. West Ham moved a bit closer to safety with a 2-2 draw at Newcastle. To Newcastle, Sunday's early game between Burnley and Sheffield United finished a goal apiece. That cracking goal from John Egan, of course, equalising things for Sheffield United. Tonight, Spurs look to get their push for European football back on track against Everton. They're down in 10th with the Merseysiders 11th. That game gets underway in North London at 8 p.m. this evening. Meanwhile, West Brom remain on course for automatic promotion to the Premier League. They're back within a point of Championship table toppers Leeds, thanks to a 4-2 win against Hull yesterday. To golf, Bryson DeChambeau has ended a 20-month winless run on the PGA Tour with a 3-stroke victory in Detroit, Michigan. The American hit a very impressive 65 on the final day of the Rocket Mortgage Classic to seal that victory. Waterford's Seamus Power did hit 2 birdies in the opening 3 holes to get us all excited on day 4, but ultimately shot a level par 72 to end in a tie for 12th. Not a bad showing at all from Seamus Power. The fixtures for the next Scottish Premiership and Championship season were to be released this morning, so around now, 9 a.m. Celtic will go for a 10th straight league title, with the campaign due to resume behind closed doors in August. Dundee United are the newcomers to the top flight, returning to replace the relegated Hearts. The previous season, of course, decided on a points per game basis after the coronavirus hit. Get the full fixture list at otbsports.com, or even better, on the new OTB Sports app. Download for free in the App Store or Play Store. As I said, those fixtures just being released around now. Valtteri Bottas won the Austrian Grand Prix for Mercedes yesterday after an eventful Formula 1 race at the Red Bull Ring. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc came second, with McLaren's 20-year-old Brit Lando Norris finishing in third. World champion Lewis Hamilton ended up fourth after he was demoted following a 5-second time penalty. All drivers wearing T-shirts with an anti-racism message ahead of that race, but 6 drivers chose not to take the knee beforehand. You've probably mentioned it from the papers as well this morning, lads, already, but the plans afoot for a reduced number of subs in rugby once the sport resumes. World Rugby Chairman Bill Beaumont has said he wants to push ahead with trials of a reduced number of replacements. According to the Times newspaper this morning, support is building for a change to the number of replacements from 8 to either 5 or 6, with the England head coach Eddie Jones and Beaumont among the high-profile backers. And finally, from me this morning, lads, Wickham will be confident of reaching the League One playoff final tonight. They have a 4-1 lead heading into the home leg of their semi-final against Fleetwood, Joey Barton's team, ending the first match with 9 men after 2 red cards. Oxford host Portsmouth before that, 2 sides drawing 1-1 in the first leg at Fratton Park.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Shane, good stuff. Thanks a million. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. If you, particularly if you've got any evidence of inter-county teams training. The Zapruder film we're looking for. If you've got it, send it on. Anthony Moyles is going to join us next here on OTB AM. In the meantime, a quick clip from a brilliant Saturday panel hosted by Eoin. Have a look.
I was really 2 years that I wasn't really playing, so hopefully that's 1 or 2 years I can get back at the end. So I think it's something maybe that you might see more and more. Maybe not for 2 years, but I think definitely kind of 4 or 5 month injury, 4 or 5 month break can do the world of good. You know, guys typically get a kind of 1 month off season, but there's some niggles and little things that they're never enough that you would stop training or stop playing, but they probably need a few months to recover. And maybe at the halfway point of people's rugby careers, if they were to get that 6 month sabbatical, then I think that would definitely kind of add another year or 2 towards the end. But I think definitely for certain guys, like, you know, I don't want to name names, but for certain guys who, you know, playing high level rugby for years, and some guys who now, you know, are regular starters for Ireland in their early 20s, those guys kind of 5-6 years down, if they could probably get a break for a few months, I think that would do them the world of good, and then they'd get that time again at the end of their careers.
Yeah, very, very thoughtful stuff there from Ian Nagle, talking about his mid-career break. That whole panel is really good stuff in the middle of it as well from Eric Donovan. Now, we want to move on back to the state of the GAA. Anthony Moyles is with us. Anthony, good morning to you. How you doing?
Morning, Ger. How are things?
A week is a long time in GAA. It was last Monday that Michael Duignan essentially excoriated the GAA. It was a carpet bomb of problems, and by Friday, the county board chairman were all being told, right, listen, we've changed our mind here by the powers that be in Croke Park. So what's your take on what happened last week?
You'd like to believe that they were just kind of going to get around to it, but you know, I think it's a typical situation, Jeremy. We've seen this over and over as the years have gone past. Anytime there's any grey area at all, and anytime there's any kind of wiggle room with something, you know, someone will find a gap and someone will have a go at it. And, you know, the week previous or the week and a half previous, when Tom Ryan said, you know, we're not getting to that, today's about setting out a plan, but we won't get to sanctions, etc. I just kind of, you know, I was just like, oh, well, here we go. You know, it's only going to take a matter of time until something happens, and you know that they're really exposed by a player getting COVID or a relation of that player or whatever it was, and then it would all come down to, well, were they playing with their club, were they playing with the county, were the inter-county team training, where were they training, and it would have just opened a kind of a myriad of problems for them. So it was good to see them react. I think Duignan, obviously, Michael was very forthright. You know, he's obviously well respected in the echelons of Croke Park, I would imagine, and obviously his profile with RTE, I'm sure, helped. And the way, I suppose, he just spoke. You know, he spoke. He's a county board chairman now. You know, he's a guy who spoke about it just at the grassroots and the situations. And county boards, you know, I think a lot of county boards, and let's not go there, but county boards and club officials, they want a lot of the decisions taken out of their hands. They want governance from the main authority. They want governance from the people who are being paid to give that governance. And they want people to say, okay, here are the red lines. If you cross the line, here's the sanction. This is how much it's going to cost, or this is the penalty that's going to be imposed. And you know, please do not cross it. So they don't want this, you know, situation where there's, you know, as I said, you know, kind of flowery language, and the county boards have to put their hands up themselves, or they're waiting on someone, you know, looking in over the wall of a training session to try and, you know, tell some tales on a particular inter-county team. So it was good to see the reaction. I'm still a little bit sceptical though, and I doubt I would be very surprised if we saw any sanctions actually take place, to be honest, because I think it may be kind of like just putting it out there. And hopefully all inter-county teams are abiding by it. But, you know, if there's, you know, I've seen a few different things over the weekend on Twitter and various different stuff where people are saying, oh, they know for sure the teams are training collectively. Like, I mean, look, you know, is it going to be someone that has to get video proof? You know, what are the sanctions? I know they're meant to come out with a statement, I think, this week to actually say what they are. But, you know, I don't know how they actually impose the things, and I don't know how much evidence they need to then go and impose it. So I think there's still a lot of kind of woolly stuff going on, but at least the threat of it is there, and that might curtail things a bit.
Well, this is not something that has not existed before, Anthony. Like, the GAA have come out to try and combat things like training camps abroad, training before Christmas, and that sort of thing. Those things have been skirted in the past. The punishment clearly hasn't been severe enough to deter everybody from doing that. What will the punishment need to be to deter all county teams from training before September 14th?
Yeah, it's a good point, Eoin. You know, and that kind of that helps my healthy dose of skepticism this morning over the last week, the weekend since it was announced. I think maybe, you know, I think the whole situation around COVID obviously changes things a bit, and the insurance, and I'm no insurance expert, but you know, the fallout from a case that, you know, may end up, you know, being really bad, or, as I said, a relation of some inter-county player, and if they're able to trace it back and say, okay, it occurred within an inter-county panel, and you know, you were collectively training and the evidence was there, I think that would be a scary enough situation for a county to be in. It would be a scary enough situation for a county board to expose themselves and to allow themselves and the county to be in. So I think there's obviously a human you know, kind of factor that probably wasn't there, say, in kind of, you know, training camps and holiday camps and all this kind of stuff. So there is a different slant. There's a health factor, there's a human factor in it, and you know, I think there really has been a lot of airtime over the last kind of couple of weeks with regards to the club, the county, the allotted time, and there's a lot of focus on it now. So, you know, I think the first manager or the first county that are exposed to this will feel pretty isolated, I would imagine, and hopefully it just won't happen.
Look, that's the best case scenario here for everybody, that everybody who had been training up to this point goes, okay, fair enough, that's serious. We're calling a halt to this because we actually see the sanctions that are there. There is presumably quite significant lessons to be learned from everything that's happening at the moment. You can have a separate inter-county and club season. You maybe could have a scenario where in next season, if you were to take some of the lessons forward, where one night a week you would release the players to train during the club season with the inter-county team, but the rest of the time they're club players, and then the club season is run off over a 8 or 10 week period, and then after that everybody's free to go and play inter-county, and then when you get knocked out, you're actually in an off-season.
Well, would you believe there actually is a different way? It's amazing. It only took a global pandemic to show us that there's actually, you know, there's enough time in the calendar year to fit all this in. Who would have thought it, you know? Like, club players, I'd say, are chomping at the bit because it's going to be run off very quickly. There's a path laid out for them. They know when it's going to start. They know when it's going to end. I'd say they're happy out, albeit, you know, the different procedures that have to take place and everything else, and there's a bit more inconvenience and, you know, all that stuff. But if anything has been shown in the last kind of 3 to 4 months with this, it is the fact that it is possible. It is absolutely 100% possible to split the season, to do whatever needs to be done to alleviate the pressure both on club and inter-county players, and to give them a definitive fixture list, a definitive time frame, a definitive season, be it 3 months for the clubs, 4 months for the inter-county, or whatever it is. Give them downtime, and then, you know, when you do all that, it goes back to what we were just speaking about, is the governance of it, and making sure then that there's sanctions in place, that there isn't this creep that happens every year. You know, teams start a little bit earlier, or a club team start a little bit earlier, or inter-county teams start a bit earlier. Just bang, have it definitive. Say, listen, there's going to be sanctions. If we find out you're doing collective training, blah, 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 you'll be hit with this, or you'll be hit with that, or you'll get penalised for league points, or whatever it is. And just set it in stone. Just have it in stone. You can have training camps at certain times of the year. Like, you know, I saw Colin Collins talking last week, and he's right. And even Mike Quirk was saying there has to be a maturity around this. And for the inter-county manager, the maturity around it is that they actually go to the club managers and they say, okay, fellas, what are you doing with your clubs? We'd like you to do this. Or what are you doing with your teams? You know, we'd like you to do this. Here's our S&C guy. He would like to talk to your S&C people if you have them in place. Because the problem with an inter-county manager, and I can imagine if I was in the same situation, is that you'd have some teams who are doing it really right, so some players are getting exposed to that, but you might have some teams that aren't doing it as well, and that some players just aren't kind of keeping up with the levels they should be keeping up. Now, you would hope that if a guy is on an inter-county panel, that he has enough self-discipline and enough self-drive that he wants to do things as best he can, regardless if he's in a club situation that isn't really maybe doing that. So communication, trust between club, inter-county manager, county board, and the hierarchy of the GAA. That trust has to be there. And as I said, and you rightly point out, Ger, the last couple of weeks, I hope it's not a missed opportunity. I really do, because this year is going to be whatever, right? It's going to be. Let's hope everything stays as is, and it does go on, and that there's not a surge and stuff, and that things aren't shut down again. Let's just hope that we get a positive kind of sensitive curve, and we keep moving on, and then the season happens. But there is an enormous opportunity falling out of this, that next season and the seasons thereafter could be massively different, and could be just so much more, concise, could be just so much more efficient, and so much more fit for purpose.
It seems that the key, Anthony, here is that the club is going first. That, perhaps it seems like such a simple point, but perhaps it's gone underappreciated here, that the club is getting out first. And no matter what sort of championship structure that's been thrown out in the past, you could come up with a million different things. But perhaps the key point to all of it is that the club gets out before the county, and therefore that ridiculous extension of the season with these long pre-seasons will no longer exist, because your pre-season, if you're looking at it from a purely elite standpoint, from an inter-county level, can be the club season. And as you say, if you've got the information coming from the paid people involved with inter-county teams and to bestow their knowledge upon the clubs, then everybody is a winner.
Absolutely, Eoin. And I think, if you're standing still, you're going backwards. So every single club, certainly intermediate and senior club, and an awful lot of junior clubs, there's so much information out there that players, and it really has to be player-led. I see a lot of stuff where players and people, they want to blame managers, or they want to blame this, they want to blame that. Like, at the end of the day, if your team isn't performing or isn't getting to a level where you wanted to get to, you're on the team, you're an adult. So you should be asking questions, you should be trying to drive it on yourself, you should be trying to get a cohort of players to up their own standards, if that's whatever it is. So standards will always begin at the club level, and if you have a really healthy club scene, and the competition is massively improved there, and you're having great battles at the club level, be it junior, intermediate, senior, as it goes up the curve, your inter-county team should benefit. So the whole thing has to be arranged around that. People have to get that into their mindset. A lot of club players, and I saw it when I was with the CPA, there's a lot of finger pointing, but then when it comes down to action, and it comes down to asking a lot of people to do something, it's kind of like, well, that's not my fight, or I won't really make a difference. It's kind of like, voting. There's an apathy there, and unfortunately, that can't happen. If you want change to happen, yes, of course it should come from the top table, and you would hope it would come from the executive in the GAA, and you would hope that the last number of months has shown them that there is an acceptance. Like this kind of worry about, oh, well, what if Leinster would, the Leinster Council would give out if we scrap the Leinster Championship, the Ulster Council would give out. Well, you know what? You're going to have to break eggs. It's just going to have to happen. If things don't change, they're going to stay the same. So things are going to have to change. There's going to be sacred cows that are going to have to be slaughtered. You're going to have to get to a point where it becomes, as I said, because you can't deal with it in the same framework. That cannot happen. And you would hope that the last number of months, they talk about, going to get the 2/3 majority and all that stuff at Congress. Like, really, if the top table and the boys really say, listen, this is the way we're going to go with this, well, then everyone else will row in. Yes, there'll be rumblings, but they'll get their majority. It happens nearly all the time.
That's it. That's it,
Sorry?
Isn't it? That is exactly the point. That you just need a shared vision for what the future looks like, and that's where that's the whole point of this whole thing, is that the leadership has to come from somebody, from somewhere. And to be honest, that's why when we had Michael Duignan on last week, the next day we wrote this up as this is what a template for a president, for a manifesto should be, because it was kind of in the absence of a manifesto for change that this one was delivered almost like the Sermon on the Mount. We should do this, we should do this. We should not ask players to be hypocrites. We're asking them to be leaders, and we're asking them also at the same time to lie about the fact that they're breaking rules and training secretly. What kind of people are we creating when we're asking them to be liars? and cheats. And Micheál Brodie called it cheating in Midwest Radio yesterday, and he's right. But that's the point. And I think you might have said it was the people who are getting paid to do this. If they come up with a template that says club first for 2 months, inter-county season for 3 months, or club first 3 months, inter-county season for 2.5 months, championship, away we go. Everybody be happy, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Like the last couple of months, lockdown, people's sense of freedom being, taken away from them. The freedom to just leave their house, walk out their front door, and go and do whatever they wanted to do. That has, whether people know it or not, that has, dropped into people's psyches now, and it's in there, and it's in there forevermore. So the freedoms that people enjoy, the simple, small little things that, previously they would have just taken for granted, they are now. Some people might be more in tune with it and might really feel that, wow, going to a GAA match, even just going down to the local pitch and standing there at the wire and looking in at, the young lads and just watching them play for an hour and 15 minutes. Whereas before that might have just been something you do without necessarily thinking about it. Now that's something big, and for some people, as I say, that will be more to the front of their mind, and others it will just be accepted that that's what they do. But I think more and more you're getting people realize that this thing can be done better, and that the days of saying, oh well, it's someone else's issue, and no, there's a lot of problems there and we can't really get around it, that's gone. So the time is rife now for change. Like the time is absolutely set for someone to take this by the balls, excuse my language, but just to go and grab it and say, look, this is the way we're going to do it. There has to be a better way. If anything the last 4 months has shown is that things can be absolutely turned on their head. Work life, home life, whatever way you want to do it, entertainment, social, the way you have social gatherings, it's all changed now. It's changed. Maybe it has changed forever. Maybe it has just changed for a couple of years. I don't know. But out of a crisis comes opportunity. Here is the opportunity to take this now, to as you say, Ger, stop this innuendo and stop this kind of, now listen, fellas, whatever goes in the camp stays in the camp. You can't talk about what we're doing. As you say, nearly making players have to lie, being secretive about stuff. Just be upfront, be honest. Take the thing, say, right, this is the way we're going to do it. Yes, there's going to be people's noses put out of joint, but you know what? There'll be people putting noses put out of joint anyway. It doesn't make a difference. Yes, there'll be someone giving out. It won't be a panacea. It won't be the absolute solution. Like the CPA have been calling for this for 3 or 4 years now. Like the blue in their face calling for it. Thankfully, there's a groundswell of opinion now, and the GAA have to tap into that. My one real, grudge sometimes with the executive GAA is that they react an awful lot. They kind of send it out there. They see how the ground is moving, and then they go, okay, well, we'll go with that side. So, for example, last week, it took Duignan to come out and do that. It took a lot of media kind of exposure to kind of say, well, we have to sanction here, instead of getting ahead of it. Get ahead of it, say, okay, no, this is what we're going to do, and we're really going to make some significant change for 2021 and beyond. And as you say, it's a manifesto that I think an awful lot of people will get behind. It won't be right year one, but you know what? It will be a hell of a lot better than what has gone on before.
And the other thing is that if you make changes and they're not right immediately, there will be definitely people who say, oh, that's it, rip it up, go back. But those people are fewer and fewer in Irish life now. It turns out that we are actually tending towards a progressive view of life where maybe it's a little bit better and we can row in behind that change, and maybe we can iterate it and make it even better the year after.
Well, there is one thing that we are pretty good at, especially in the GAA, and that's tinkering. We've tinkered for a long number of years. We stick in a little added rule here and addendum to something. So we'll have no problem, tinkering with something. But I think that the core beliefs have to change, and the core principles have to change. And to go back to Eoin's point, everything is born from the club. You're a club player before you're an inter-county player. You learn your trade in the club. My point, which is probably badly made, is that the clubs around the country, and the GAA have to take massive credit for something that has happened over the last 20 odd years, which is that you could drive to any old town in Ireland, and you could see probably a really, really good GAA club with maybe a little stand, nice dressing rooms. When I started out, it's some time ago. It's longer than I would have hoped, but there was loads of places where you go and you get tugged out in the car, or you get tugged out on the side of the road, or you get tugged out in the prefab or whatever it is. Whereas now, most GAA clubs, be them junior, senior, intermediate, have beautiful facilities. The next thing for them now is that it pushes on, and that we actually have a situation where the standards are improving at the club. Fellas are taking responsibility. Clubs themselves are taking responsibility, and they're demanding that the game change. And you can see that happening. They're demanding that things change. Communication, as I said, between the club, between the players, between the county board, between the inter-county manager, a realisation that everyone is moving in the same direction, which is what ultimately that the inter-county team achieve, be it a senior All-Ireland or whatever it is, whatever that goal is, but that the standards improve all the way. Now, if the standards are improving at club level and within the actual structures of the GAA, you would really, really hope that the standards are improving at the top level. And therefore, if I'm a paid individual being paid whatever amount of money to come up with really, really good structures and policies that are going to help the game, not hinder the game, help it, move it into the next century, move it onto the next level, take account of the fact that players are more educated, managers are more educated, county boards are more educated, take into account the fact that people have other things to do, that there's a lot of pressures coming on younger people, and that people might be pulled here and there, and also take into account all the various different surveys that have been done over the last 10 or 15 years, which says that the playing population is decreasing. How do I arrest that? How do I stop it? Well, let's put in a game, and let's put in a fixture schedule, and let's put in a game that's attractive to play and not a hindrance to play. Let's have something that fellas are dying to get out there and play for 3 months of the year, 4 months of the year, or whatever it is, rather than kind of going, oh, here we go, another year of season, and I don't know where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I actually, you would hope that we're on the verge of some kind of shared understanding of that, and if we get there, then anything is possible. Anthony, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million for joining us.
No bother, lads. Take it easy.
Anthony Moyles there giving us some thoughts on the current situation in the GAA. If you want to get in touch with us, 0879 180 180 is the number. This Friday at 1 o'clock, we're going to be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our brand new game show. It's called Know Your Football. The prize fund has been reset after a single winner last week answered all 15 questions correctly and walked away with $1,000 in cold, hard cash. You need to register at quiz.otbsports.com, quiz.otbsports.com. Make sure you've logged on before 1 o'clock. We've changed the time from 12 to 1 o'clock next Friday for you to play along with us. We'll be doing a live show from around about 12:30, 1:15 to build up the hype, but we had about 350 people playing, so your odds of winning are actually pretty good, so long as you know your football. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Now, Gary Breen is going to join us next on OTB AM. This morning on Saturday's OTB, Damien Delaney and Johnny Ward got talking about John Egan's form and why he should be the first name on Stephen Kenny's Irish 11.
Is he getting close to the position now where he's almost the first name on the Ireland team sheet at this point?
Yeah, definitely for me. I know Shane Duffy's been in and out at Brighton as well. So for me, he's starting regularly in the top 6 Premier League side. He's a great age, got a huge back catalogue of experience now at all levels of football. I think he's proved that he's more than capable of making a step up to international football, even when it is to go from a 3 into a 4. I know a lot of people might kind of, look down their nose at and say it's easy, centre back. It's not. When you play in a really specialised system and a kind of a specialised way of a specialised system at Sheffield United, middle of 3, and you're asked to do certain things, to go into a 4 with Ireland can be difficult. But he's got enough experience behind him, probably enough confidence and enough kind of self-assurity that he should be able to do that. But for me, he's the first defensive name on the team sheet.
I remember when Mick got the job, I was kind of making the point that Shane Duffy was going to be a big player for him, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case with Kenny. And he name-checked Egan. I think it was his first press conference. Egan has already spoken glowingly about Kenny, as you'd expect. And as Damo says, some of these players playing Kenny's not going to be playing 3 at the back, and some of them might slightly struggle to adjust. But this lad could have a really good career for Ireland, and he's I'm not sure what's going to happen with Duffy under Kenny. I think his ability on the ball and how deep he plays, very, very deep, might be an issue. But Egan's going to be a big player and literally the first defender on the team.
Is Egan's form and his quality actually worth a formational shift then? Is it something that you would actually...
It's not going to happen, though. It's not like it's not going to happen. Now you could say that Doherty and Stevens are going to be like really well suited, but Kenny is all about that that midfield that has basically two wide players, but that can work very hard and support the fullbacks. I'd say it's literally 1,000,000 to 1 he plays, maybe 500,000 to 1 that he plays.
Really?
Yeah, don't see it at all.
Right, Gary Breen, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm very well, thanks.
The lads there, Johnny obviously is a League of Ireland aficionado, so he reckons that there's no chance of Stephen Kenny ever going to 3 at the back. But stranger things have happened, have they?
Well, listen, I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. I think that what Stephen does is see what players are available and the best system that suits them. So if he feels it is the case, I know form and history suggests it wouldn't be that, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think he'll look at the group of players, who's available to him, who best serves the system and how they can be the most competitive they possibly can. So we'll see.
How valuable an asset is that particular set of qualities that John Egan would bring to that? The idea of almost moulding a defence based on the fact that your best defender plays in a back three. How big a factor is that for a manager and from a defensive standpoint?
I don't think that Stephen Kenny will look at it and just think because John Egan's excelling in a back three that he's going to change his whole ethos in terms of how he believes. And I think I agree with the lads there. I think John can play in a 3. I think he can comfortably play in a 2 as well. And I know at times, if you're so used to playing in a particular system, it can take a little bit of time. But if there's one thing you learned about John Egan in terms of his rise throughout the leagues is that every challenge that is put in front of him, he can deal with it. And Eoin, obviously, you and I will be looking at his career ever since he started because of his famous dad as such. And of course, he was at Sunderland as a young player, so I'd have known much about him then. So I've been able to watch his career from a distance. I don't know him as such, but I've just been impressed with everything he does, every little step up that he makes initially to get over that dreadful injury that could be at a time when you're trying to make a name for yourself in football. It's such a pivotal moment in your career, but he battles back from them, works his way through the leagues. He was a brilliant player at Gillingham. I would have been coaching against him for Peterborough. Makes that step up to Brentford. And you think about Brentford in terms of how good they are at recruiting players and then selling them on. Then makes that move to Sheffield United. I think Brentford supporters certainly were thinking it was a sideways move, bearing in mind the struggles that Sheffield United were having. But he's proved them wrong. And look at him now excelling at the top half of the Premier League.
What are the differences between playing in a 3 and playing in a 2?
Well, I think probably the most obvious one is look at someone like David Luiz. He can look all right in a back 3 because you've got people narrow to you. So you've got a bit of protection. I think initially, if you look at John Egan, I maybe would have said, he might find it difficult in the Premier League because of the fact that the strikers' movements are so much better. If you think about that early goal that Leicester got against them at the beginning of the season, Jamie Vardy, and he exposed John a little bit in that 1v1 situation. It was a brilliant pass from midfield for Leicester. They break away, they punish you in a way that you don't get punished in the Championship. So you're thinking, okay, maybe if he's vulnerable in those situations in space, but he's so comfortable now in terms of those particular situations. Because if you think about that game against Tottenham recently, against Harry Kane, there were about 4 or 5 occasions Harry Kane just spins down the shoulder of him. The midfielder for Tottenham's got time and space to get his head up and make the pass. But John's angle of approach, the way he opens his body up, just negates the problem, steps across, takes the pass, or can make a challenge on Harry Kane's first touch. Those type of things suggest that he is a quick learner. And it's not out of context in terms of what he's done throughout his career and how quickly he has adjusted to every step up he's made.
I wonder, does that learning come from the journey he has been on, really? I mean, like coming through perhaps at an academy as a wunderkind, so to speak, perhaps there is a lot done for you that perhaps you don't need to figure out yourself. And given his circuitous route to the very top, having scored in all 4 divisions, John Egan's had to figure out quite a lot for himself.
Yeah, I think for a learning curve, and I agree 100% with you. I think for any young centre-half, even if you're at a top club now, I'd still want him to go out and play in the lower leagues to learn what it's like, to learn about the physicality of it, your decision making, the fact that if you make a mistake, it costs you points, it costs people jobs, as opposed to playing in the kind of reserves leagues or whatever they call it these days, under 21s. I don't even know. I've no interest in it whatsoever. But I think his learning curve has been steep, and that's the reason why now, at his age 27, I think he has real maturity. Look at the number of games he's played as well. So the step up to the Premier League, which is the biggest one, the gulf between the Championship and the Premier League is vast. It really is. But he stepped up so well, and I think we've seen it at international level as well. Because when he initially came into the team, I was covering it, commentating on him, and playing in those early games for Ireland. And straight away you thought, yeah, this is a player who can be comfortable. Listen, he still had a lot of mistakes in him, but you do in terms of coping with that level. But he just learns so quickly. I'm a massive fan of him. I mean, I could wax lyrical about him throughout what he achieved at Gillingham, Brentford, those type of things, getting in league teams of the year, not only captaining teams, but I just think he's the type of centre-half, if you were coming into the national team now, Stephen Kenny is, that you would be thinking, yeah, he's someone I can really rely on.
I've just looked it up there, 293 games. Now, they include everything, so... but that's a phenomenal level of experience. And I remember we had Damien Comolli on the show a couple of years back, and he was talking about how it's impossible for clubs to find centre-backs now because the point you made, the kids come through the academy and they're the ones that end up being trusted. They get thrust into the first team very young. They make mistakes, they lose confidence, and away they go. Yeah. So, like... at this stage of his career, he's 28 in October. Like, the sky's kind of the limit if you're a good centre-back who begins to get a reputation as somebody who can survive and thrive in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think they are few and far between. I genuinely believe that. And I think the reason why, Jerry, is that he has the capability to play in a footballing team. Listen, look how Sheffield United play. You've got centre-halves on the left-hand side, right-hand side, who more often than not are in right-wing, left-wing positions. So they do leave John on his own at times. I know Norwood will drop in and give him a little bit of protection, but they're expansive, Sheffield United, in a way that no one would have foreseen unless you'd seen them. I think some pundits, some journalists, media outlets are a bit lazy in terms of thinking that Sheffield United coming up from the Championship are just going to be a Route 1 footballing team, but they're not. They pass to the first. So he's a player who can do that. Then add to the fact that so many of these young centre-halves coming through the academies or big clubs, they're great stepping into midfield. They're great as that modern-day centre-half in terms of breaking lines with passes, but they really struggle in the air with the physicality. But he has both. He can deal with both, and that is something that's not. There's not that much of that available if you were looking out for centre-halves now.
He's got 2 years left on his deal at Sheffield United, so it might not be beyond the bounds possibility that somebody comes in from around about this time, or he gets a new contract around now from Sheffield United to make sure that isn't something that happens. So things are looking up for him.
Yeah, they really are. And like I said, I don't particularly know him, but you learn about him in terms of where he's been at Sunderland, thought so highly of him. He's a great lad. You can see that in terms of how well he's thought of by his teammates, certainly at Sheffield United. And I'm just delighted for him in terms of those dark moments in which was a really bad injury that he had. For him to come back, that type of mental strength aligned to that ability that he has. Because everyone's saying about, he's this player now because of the amount of games he's played, the experience. Ultimately, he's this type of player now because of his ability. He's a very good footballer.
Yeah, 100%. He's in Stephen Kenny's team. Stephen Kenny's already name-checked him. So if it is a 4 and it's a back 4, who is Ireland's starting back 4 at the moment?
Well, it's a difficult one. It's still the kind of big debate at right back. I think Seamus Coleman, since the restart, has shown his real quality. He looks like he's got his energy back. I never really doubted him in terms of his qualities and in terms of his mental strength. I think Enda Stevens is your left back, so it pretty much is that, isn't it? I don't think it's too much of a wild thing to say that it will be the guys that we would think it'd probably be Coleman, Duffy, Egan, Stevens.
And all of a sudden it looks really good.
Well, it does, and it's not just defensively, Jerry, as well, that it looks good. I think there's options in centre midfield now that we probably haven't had it. I love the fact that James McCarthy is staying fit and healthy and playing so many games. You talk about, Robbie Brady's had such a difficult season, only 5 Premier League starts, I think, so he needs to get over those injury problems. But we have options. You think about the centre-forward options now as well, and there's other players who are starting to come into the mix. We're talking about, obviously, Shane Long, a bit of a renaissance again at Southampton, so he'll come back into the mix, I think, more than he was under Mick McCarthy. You've got Obafemi, you've got Smallbone there as well. You've got Malumbi at Millwall's playing regularly. So I think there are lots of options, and it does bode well. I really do think time is everything in football. I genuinely believe that. And I think Stephen Kenny has taken over this Ireland team at just the right time. And then, of course, as I think a lot of people will say, that Ireland are getting Stephen Kenny at just the right time.
Yeah, so we should feel a little bit excited about what we're going to hopefully see, and it's not that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not that far away.
Yeah,
it's 6 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, Joe, you know as well as I do that 6 weeks things change. You know, people can get injured or people can come to the fore. We just got to hope that everyone stays as healthy as possible.
We were talking a little bit about this a little bit earlier on. It's also a very exciting time to be a Manchester United fan. When you think back to where we were in September, October, every defeat or a bad result against a team who would come and Old Trafford would feel a little bit like a morgue and they'd lose. And it was like, one more of these defeats is going to be enough for this board to sack Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, that team is very exciting.
It does look like it, but we've had a full storm before under Solskjaer, haven't we, when he initially came in? So I think they need to be a little bit reserved. But there's no doubt, looking at that front five, I mean, that's some real quality there. Rashford, of course, is maturing all the time. Martial is getting a consistency to get to his game that we've never really seen before. He's in his best goal-scoring season of his career. But then just add in Mason Greenwood. Now, this is a player that, if you've heard about the players coming through at United, this is a player that they've deemed that he's got real quality. He really has. There's no doubt about it. And initially, when we saw him in pre-season, in all their friendly games, he was playing a lot. And you could see the ability to cut in on that left-hand side, finish with great quality. Now, we're seeing not only that finishing ability, but we've seen his physicality. He looks like he's put on half a stone of muscle, it seems. He looks strong, he looks powerful. Now, you've got a front three now who are set up to get goals. You think about Rashford playing on the left-hand side, cuts in on his right foot, his strong right foot, suddenly the goal opens up, he's a threat. Greenwood on the other side and Martial then at the point. But what you do get is that fluidity of that front three. They're quite flexible. They can all play at the point. They can all drift out wide. Add to that, and which has been the biggest difference for me, is Fernandes in terms of that quality just behind them. I mean, he's been sensational. The difference he has made to that team has been incredible. And they are playing with verve. They are playing in a way that that stereotype of Manchester United. But the big difference, what he has given them, Bruno, is the fact that they're not one-dimensional now. And they're not just a counter-attacking team. They literally can play through the thirds because of him. And he's a player who can score from distance. We've seen at the weekend that he can run in behind defenders and play ahead of the play. He should have scored when he went 1v1 after that brilliant Martial pass. So this is a player, midfielder, number 10, however you want to describe him, who's got the lot. And these goal-scoring stats that he brought over from Portugal, which were amazing, you're suddenly thinking, well, can you do that in the Premier League? That's the biggest challenge. Well, his assists and goals, he's just continued it, and he looks a fabulous signing.
Is part of the reason he's had such an impact just because he has so much confidence himself? Like, I understand that obviously from a footballing perspective, he transforms how the team play because all of a sudden, you don't have a kid in there, or you don't have somebody whose job is ostensibly to defend and stop. It's actually somebody whose job it is to get forward and be creative. But there's also a sense of like, well, I mean, I'm really good at this. Like, and that didn't really seem to be part of the makeup of this United team.
No, and I think that over the years, certainly since Ferguson's retirement, I think there have been too many Manchester United signings or players who have come through and played for them who don't have that arrogance, and in a good way, that confidence, that real inner belief that, this is my arena, that I belong here. And for him to hit the ground as quick as he did run it, it's fantastic. And he's a top player, there's no doubt about it. And I always reserve judgment, and I always think, listen, I know great stats and scoring in the leagues of Europe, or be creative, or a really good defender, but I do believe that the Premier League asks you questions that no other league does. And for him to excel as much as he has done so far, it's just been so impressive. And I think that you're seeing now that he gets the ball, and those like flying machines up front for United, they just run because that trust is there that he can make that pass. Now, he'll recognise if it's not on, he'll take it, and he has that ability then to keep that ball for 4 or 5 seconds to allow those centre forwards or those wide men to spin back and give another option. Whereas before, maybe players in that position were getting robbed, and in United were getting counter-attacked. But it does bode well, it really does. And everyone's talking about, can they bridge the gap? the goal scoring form of that front three, they have 55 goals this season. Liverpool's front three that we laud about 51 goals. That won't be the reason they catch up to the top two teams. It won't be. It will be defensively. And there's still a vulnerability about that United back four, still a vulnerability about De Gea, despite the fact that we've normally seen him as a world-class goalkeeper in a way that there isn't with Liverpool. You think about Van Dijk. I know, like, since they've won it, maybe they've looked a little bit off their kind of usual high standards. But look at that chance Grealish gets with a couple of minutes to go. Alisson has had nothing to do and just makes a brilliant save. That's the difference. It's defences, it's goalkeepers who win you the leagues. The forwards and the flair players, the goal scorers, they win you games. Defences and goalkeepers win you leagues.
Is there a situation here where Manchester United take back Dean Henderson, and I don't know what the potential signing is? Is it one high-profile centre-back signing on the level of someone like Kalidou Koulibaly, or is it as simple as that, Gary, or what way do you see it?
Yeah, I do. I do think that would be a statement. Whoever gets that centre-half from Napoli, I think that's a massive statement. I've been intrigued to see the way it's going. Initially, it was Liverpool, maybe, and I'm thinking, well, if you put him alongside Van Dijk as well, bearing in mind, I rate Gomez anyway, and Matip for that matter. But I do think, a real top-quality centre-half will make a massive difference to Manchester United. Because even if you think about the goal that they initially concede, the ball comes in the box. It's a routine header for any centre-half with any physicality. We talked about John Egan having that ability to play out. But he's not going to miss that header the way that Lindelof does. He's just not going to do that. And, of course, people say about Maguire getting nutmeg. That's a brilliant piece of skill. That skill and that finish is something that you normally see from the likes of Messi. So I wouldn't be too bothered about that. But Henderson's a big decision. It really is, because he's excellent at Sheffield United. There's no doubt about that. But to be then the number one at Manchester United is a completely different step up. So they've got to make a big decision there. But there's no doubt in my mind United are on the right path. But in terms of bridging that gap, they won't be able to do it because it's too big, because defensively they're not good enough. The reason Liverpool were able to do it last season was because they got Van Dijk in, and suddenly whatever the point total they were behind Manchester City, they were able to bridge it to 1 point and in this season go past them. The reason they've done that, and the reason why Liverpool are the Premier League champions, is because they've signed Van Dijk.
We were talking about back threes there. Arsenal played a back three with your man David Luiz at the heart of it. Clean sheet, 90 minutes under the belts, world-class defender all over again. How impressive were they in your view, and how sustainable is this? Because they've got some very tough fixtures coming up.
I thought it was a brilliant result, because if you think about the form of Wolves and how good they have been, they've probably benefited most from the lockdown break because of how much football they played at the beginning of the season. So they come back energised. So I felt this was a massive test for Arsenal going to Wolves. You think about how few goals Wolves concede, how strong Wolves are in second halves. But if you're saying to me a clean sheet, how impressed were you defensively? No, I wasn't impressed with them, to be perfectly honest. And the reason being, if you think about that first minute, they do one ball, straight ball up from the back. Mustafi goes underneath it. Jimenez takes it down and just passes it on. Kolasinac square. Traore's in on goal. Martinez, the goalkeeper, I must have think 4 or 5 occasions he's come out as a sweeper keeper to get him out of trouble. But he wasn't alone there. They go 1-0 up just before half-time, and I'm thinking, OK, second half Wolves are so strong. The majority of their points have come from second half performances. And there was a 10-minute period from about 55 minutes to 65 minutes where Arsenal's defending was absolutely woeful. Traore gets down the right wing, puts a cross into the back post. Mustafi's got Jimenez, and it's a basic movement just to go there and just to spin off to the back post. Jimenez has got a free header. The saving grace there was Cedric Suarez, who I think is going to be a brilliant signing at right back. Narrows up in a way that you don't normally see Arsenal's fullback and bumps Jimenez. He's looking for a penalty. It's not a penalty, it's good defending. And then it happens again. A simple ball into the box. Jimenez just pulls off the shoulder of Kolasinac. He hasn't a clue where he is. And likewise, 5 minutes later, when you think about Traore going in 1v1, he's 15 yards away from Kolasinac. Kolasinac looks at him. You know he's a flying machine. And he still lets him get in on a straight run where he should score again. So as good as they've been, as good as Arteta is in making sure that he sets his team up to protect against those weaknesses will always be there. And that's why, as impressed as I've been with Arteta, I really have been in terms of how disciplined he has, the shape that he's got his team, that he's not suffering any falls. Those players will just let you down, and they will continue to do so.
It's okay though, because he's just got the gig, right? So there's a couple.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like I wouldn't be as excited if I'm an Arsenal fan as I am if I was a Man United fan, but I would certainly think we've got somebody here. The not suffering fools, I think, is actually one of the things that maybe Solskjaer isn't getting enough credit for. Just burning people out of the club who were opportunity stoppers or bad around the training ground, and you're seeing it now. Arteta is doing exactly the same thing. Same playbook is like, you're a waster. I don't care that you're my most expensive player. I don't care that every week you're racking up $250,000 in wages. You're not playing for me. And there's a strength for a new manager. There's a bit of strength in that.
I think you need that. I think you need to send a message to the rest of the squad. But the more important one for me was the petulance of Guendouzi, that at 19, 20 years of age, is that he thinks he can just like give it the big I am, and he's just not having it. And I don't think that's necessarily just about his character. I think he's ill-disciplined in his positional play as well. I think he runs around and every Arsenal fan thinks, look at him, he's tackling, but he gives up his positional play all the time. Now, if you think about Arteta, in terms of his, his skill set as a central midfielder in the Premier League, it was holding that position, giving you that platform with which to play from. All the Arsenal good teams had that. So that's good that he is dismissing him. In terms of that back three, I think probably that's the way to go. I think it negates the area that Luiz has to work in, so he protects him a little bit. But also that back three gives you is 3 players there because Xhaka, Ceballos don't stay with midfield runners. We've seen that over the years. So with 3 centre-halves back there, if anyone runs off them from midfield, you'd hope they'd collect them. But in terms of Arteta, yes, it's not. I don't think it can be the same playbook, Jer, as Ollie at Manchester United, because they don't have the financial muscle. You think about Solskjaer, he's been able to get rid of a few people because he's had the ability to go out and buy and get other players in. Arsenal won't be able to do that, so he's going to have to be creative. It's probably why he's promoting youth at the moment, and I think he's going to have to make sure that he creates some wealth by getting rid of some of those high earners and certainly getting rid of the players he may be able to get a fee for, the likes of Lacazette, those type of guys.
Yeah, Eoin, exciting times as an Arsenal fan?
Oh, listen, I mean, the sky is the limit. I mean, it may even be a top 6 finish. Like, truly keeping place in the trophy cabinet now for the 6th place trophy this year, because that's what it is now. Who cares about the top 4 trophy? All about the top 6 trophy.
Ah, look, the greatest revolutions start in tiny little rooms and then they grow slowly from there. John White has been in touch on Twitter and says he'd love to see this Ireland team. Darren Randolph in goals and a back 3 of Coleman, Duffy and Egan, with Doherty and Stevens as the wing backs. James McCarthy holding Hendrick and Horahan, and then McGoldrick and Long up front. I don't know if McGoldrick is at the tip of a diamond there. Probably that's just the way it's been written down. Obviously, I mean, I can see that team having width and our best players are playing, and it makes a lot of sense.
It does, and it's great that we as fans are able to say, well, listen, we've got a few options now. It's not so set in stone that we've only got, well, we will struggle to get a really competitive 11. Now it looks like we've got players who will be pushing others for those jerseys as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I think certainly Seamus Coleman, in the way that Ancelotti sets up Everton, quite often he is narrowing up as a centre-half, even from a full-back position. You know, we're in and out of position. They seem to go from a 3 at the back to a 4 at the back. So Seamus can do that. I've no doubt about that in my mind. I'd have no doubt that 2 centre-halves either side of Duffy will play to his strengths because he won't have to be the ball carrier as such. Although he won't shy away from it. But I don't think it's probably one of his strengths. And then you can get your wing-backs in, but... Listen, it's great. We're supporters that we can speculate, but I just don't think I don't think we'll play like that. I think the concern certainly with a 3 at the back, a 5 at the back, is that we get pinned back, we don't get out. I think on the front foot, Stephen Kenny will want to be dominating those midfield areas, and that's something that's music to our ears, isn't it? Bearing in mind how often over the last few seasons our midfielders just give the ball away. If we can look after that football, it would be great to see.
Yeah, transformative. Gary, great stuff. Great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Gary Breen giving us some thoughts there about the football at the weekend. As ever, if you've got any views, the hashtag is OTB AM, or indeed you can get us on WhatsApp these days, where we've got all the technology now. 087 9180 180 is the number to send it to. If you haven't got the OTB Sports app, get on it. It is free, gratis and for nothing. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store or in Google Play. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio today at 12 o'clock, Off the Bench with Irish international Denise O'Sullivan. OTB Gold, Michael Rasmussen talks doping in the peloton and cycling. Paul Rouse's History of Sport, episode 10, the impact of partition on Irish sport, is going live at 3 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, it's the OTB Culture Hall of Fame, Gavin James. And OTB Gold tonight is a brilliant interview with Ray Boom Boom Mancini, who has a sensational story, killed a man in the ring, and just an absolutely searingly honest interview with Ray Boom Boom Mancini. If you've missed anything this morning, don't worry, you can get it all back on the OTB AM podcast. Search for the OTB AM podcast stream wherever you get your pods. Again, on the app, it's right there for you, and it's time-stamped, so you can fast forward through football with Brian Kerr, Damien Delaney and Gary Breen, GAA with Anthony Moyles, the sports pages and latest stories. We're live from 7:30 every morning. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Take care.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.